All right, everyone, this is the meeting of the Solar and Battery Storage Moratorium Study Committee of February 8th, 2023. It's 5:30, and this is being brought to you by Area 58 Cable TV. And I just want to tell the members here tonight that tonight's the next to the last meeting, and the reason I say that is we'll work on the solar bylaw changes and introduce the new battery storage bylaw. And so we'll be working on that with Tom Bott, and we'll have one more meeting next week, and then everything goes to the planning board and KP Law for review. So just for the record, I'd like to just state who is here. So on my far right at the computer, the man with the tie is Mr. Tom Bott.
Not necessarily representing the far right, however.
No. And next we have John Gatsky. Next we have Savory Moore, Bruce Mackey here. And then we have Roger Shores, Fran Mello, Sarah Hewins, and Steve Ward, last on the left. And so that takes care of everybody that's here right now. Jen Bogart is not going to be here tonight, and we are expecting Mr. Shea to come in shortly. But I'll let Tom, soon as he gets set up, Tom can start with his review of the solar bylaw changes.
Alrighty, you received in email, and I also printed hard copies for you of the latest changes to the solar bylaw. There was a couple of points we were discussing, and as we did a couple weeks ago where Fran was doing our wordsmithing, we sent this version to Connie Shea for some wordsmithing as well, some of the things that he was concerned about. And so the document you have in front of you now that says in the bottom, because we try to track these by the date at the bottom, 2/7/23. The yellow highlighted text is from Connie, and the green text are things that I brought over from the Falmouth zoning bylaw.
I'm sorry, Tom, do you happen to have another copy of that?
I do.
Here, right, there's one here.
Oh, thank
All
you.
right.
Connie's got it.
I got a couple of spares as well.
Oh, is it this one?
Yeah.
I just
Oh,
got- well,
yep.
What's the
Never
date
mind.
down there?
Yeah,
that's it.
thank you, I'm sorry. Apologies.
So that. No, there's.
If you could sit
there-
next to a microphone, that would really be good.
Oh, I didn't. No.
Yeah, because
Right there.
the minutes are being taken by the video, and
Yeah, there's also a packet there for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and so let me say just on that segue about minutes, at one point I had a dream like, yeah, I could knock out the minutes for this thing after a meeting. You know, some dreams just don't come true. So we've enlisted one of our minute takers, and she is in the midst of producing the minutes from the previous meetings. And so we do have at the end of tonight's meeting minutes from January 11th as well. So I was just saying that the document you have is the one I emailed for you. It has the highlights that Connie had made, changes that Connie had proposed in yellow highlight, and text in green that I had brought over from Carver. And so for whatever reason, my computer is not chiming up right now, but so that first thing that's in the bylaw that I added from Carver is that and shall follow the guidelines set forth in the Mass DOER, Mass DEP, Mass CEC Clean Energy Results ground-mounted PV systems dated December 15th as amended to the most current guidelines. So this is a document that's put out by DOER. You have in your packets. I printed it on two-sided paper because I'm just trying to kill a few less trees. And in here, in the Q&A, they talk about issues that you see in the table of contents. Background, hazardous material, end-of-life decommissioning, ambient temperatures, heat island, electromagnetic fields, property values, public safety, including fires, historic preservation, noise, water-related impacts, glare, and endangered species, and natural heritage. This is what we put into the bylaw in Falmouth and in Carver. So essentially, anybody who was going to bring a project to Carver had to be familiar with these particular points that the DOER points out, and would have to comply with for any sort of development that they brought to the town. And we can get into some of those in just a bit, because they fit back to some of the issues of glare and fires and things like that we sort of talked about before. But if we could go to page 4, and if I can turn it over to Connie to talk about those things that are highlighted in yellow and what you put together, if that's okay with you, Connie.
These are more or less just copied from or pasted from the Belchertown or the Warrentown bylaws that were sent to us. And there are some things on here that aren't in site plan review and should be considered as required documents specific to the solar. Existing conditions should be done. Locations of public water supply and associate, well, the aquifer isn't particularly necessary because the entire town is on the aquifer, or it's under the overlay district. Proposed layout of the system and related structures, stormwater and site management devices, fences, potential shading. Much of that is covered, and C is covered under the site plan, but proposed changes to the landscape plans detailing the natural buffer, sight lines from abutting residential, construction, stormwater management, and erosion control. G is covered to some degree under site plans, and post-installation stormwater management plan. And of course, the all-important material data safety sheets should all be included in regards to anything being put in wetlands or on the ground. I have read a lot about the solar panels in the solid state, and in the handout that you'll say that Tom gave us from the state, it talks about hazardous materials and the risk of chemical releases to the environment during normal usage time, but end of life, damaged, and of course panels are do present a danger and become a generator at the end of life, whether it's small or large quantity. A lot of these solar facilities that we see now that are already up contain heavy metals in the panels, and in order to be recycled, it's not that they're sent to your typical recycling agency. They're recycled as hazardous materials under large or small generators, and both the state and the federal government have very specific guidelines for those, and we're not asking for them to get a hazardous waste generator number at this particular time, but I think it's important that if these panels are broken or non-functioning or have reached the end of their life, that they're not going to cause any damage to the environment that we can't fix. There's a lot of heavy metals in these, especially the older ones. I'm not sure if the newer ones are moving away from it, but we should know what's in it, where it's going, and the changes that were made. On page 6, other setbacks, they
Okay,
should...
Can we pause
Okay, sure.
for a second here? So to that, so this is what the guidance from DOER says. This is regarding hazardous materials on page 5 of the document. The question, what, if any, health risks to chemicals used in the manufacture of solar panels and other devices used in solar PV arrays pose if they are released into the environment? The reply to their question they asked themselves is, bottom line, because PV panels are enclosed and don't mix with water or vaporize into the air, there is little, if any, risk of chemical releases to the environment during normal use. The most common type of PV panel is made of tempered glass, which is quite strong. They pass hail tests and are regularly installed in Arctic and Antarctic conditions. Only in the unlikely event of a sufficiently hot fire is there a slight chance that chemicals could be released. This is unlikely because most residential fires are not hot enough to melt PV components, and PV systems must conform to state and federal fire safety, electrical, and building codes. Transformers used, because I know Sarah's going to ask me to do that in just a second, make that bigger on the screen.
Well, it does say modern transformers typically use non-toxic
Yeah.
coolant such as
Well,
mineral.
I meant on this screen, I made it bigger
Oh, I'm
for you.
sorry.
So transformers used in PV installations are similar to the ones used throughout the electrical distribution systems in cities and towns, and have the potential to release chemicals if they leak or catch fire. Transfer coolants containing halogens have some potential for toxic releases to the air if combusted. However, modern transformers typically use non-toxic coolants such as mineral oils. Potential releases from transformers using these coolants at PV installations are not expected to present a risk to human health. So under the site of more information, ground-mounted PV solar panels are typically made with panels of silicon solar cells covered with a thin layer of protected glass, which is attached to an inert solid underlying substrate, while the vast majority of PV panels currently in use are made of silicon. Certain types of solar cells may contain cadmium telluride, copper, indium, I should have practiced these words before, diselenide, and gallium arsenide. All solar panels, including the chemicals noted above, are contained in a solid mixed, insoluble, and non-viable at ambient conditions and enclosed. Therefore, releases to the ground from leaching to the air from volatilization during use or from panel breakage are not a concern. Particulate emissions should only occur if the materials were ground to a fine dust, but there is no realistic scenario for this. Panels exposed to extremely high heat could emit vapors and particulates from PV panels components to the air. However, researchers have concluded that the potential for emissions derived from PV components during typical fires is limited given the relatively short duration of most fires and the high melting point above 1,000 degrees Celsius of PV materials compared to roof materials typically observed during residential fires, which might be between 800 and 900 degrees Celsius. In the rare instance where a solar panel might be subject to higher temperatures, the silicone and other chemicals that comprise the solar panels would likely bind to the glass that covers the PV panels and should remain there. Release of any toxic materials from solid-state inverters is also unlikely, provided appropriate electrical and installation requirements are followed. More information on public safety and fires, see the public safety and fire section of this document. We should also note that usually rain is sufficient to keep the panels clean, so no extra cleaning in which cleaning products are used would be necessary. And they cite the sources for that information. So I just wanted to, drill down on what the information we've got from DOER on that particular issue of what's in the panels and what's the prospects, the possibilities of what could happen to them.
Right. I mean, the first sentence says there's little, if any, risk of chemical release to the environment during normal use, but the discussion is, or you brought the discussion to, if it's not in normal use, it becomes waste, and then what becomes of it? Does it just sit there, and then we start to collect? Because solar panels aren't treated, you can't send it to the same recycling center that you send your bottles, your cans, your paper. They go to a hazardous waste recycling material center or a hazardous waste disposal site. So do we allow them to sit out there to become a level of hazardous waste above small quantity generators, or do we require them, or should we require them to be removed when they're not functioning or not used?
And we'll get to that point, because we did add some of that language in there as well. And I don't know if it goes to the same place, but I know from my conversations with DPW department in Kingston from back in the day, is that street sweepings, the things that they pull out of catch basins, they can't just throw those away. Those have to go to, essentially they're considered hazardous waste.
Yeah.
And they have to go to another facility.
Yes.
To what extent is that stuff hazardous? Well, it's got oil in the antifreeze or whatever might be in there, but whatever that level is, typically these regulations require an abundance of caution to make sure that we're not introducing something into the environment that would be not good for that.
So, is there a updated version of this?
There is not. I looked and asked a couple times, but that's it from 2015.
So this is still the common
Correct.
guidance?
That's correct. And so we've got a link to it as well, and if that becomes part of the bylaw, that'll be part of the application process that folks have to know that this is, they have to, play by that particular, those particular rules. So back to where we were at. So Connie, you had the floor.
Oh,
Sorry.
it was...
I'm trying not to be the chairman.
Oh, yeah,
Mr.
it was
Chairman.
other setbacks, 150 feet from abutting properties, wells, and septic systems. But this is, a lot of that has more to do with site clearing and not necessarily well-drained cranberries or agricultural land. There should be a statement in regards to glare, that it shouldn't glare on houses or roads. And I did copy and paste the mitigation measures from Belchertown, but I thought they were a little extreme. They call for a 4-to-1 replacement, but honestly, if you're going to be mitigating or replacing trees that you cut down, how do you mitigate a 100-year-old tree that you cut down by planting a sapling? So there has to be some form of balance in regards to that, and I was thinking more of a 2-to-1 replacement rather than the 4 times that Belchertown calls for in regards to that.
Do you want to take these one at a time, Tom, instead of just...
Yeah,
you
please.
wanna-
No, I just wanted to give a
Yeah.
quick overview.
Yeah, okay.
All righty. So other setbacks, that is on page
This is on
6.
Page 6, yeah.
Other setbacks, large shall be sited at least 150 feet from abutting properties, wells, and septic systems.
I have a question about that, and I read this real quick, but, we're going through it right now. I can understand wells. I'm not sure about the septic systems, though.
Well, I think part of this is again, this one's copied and pasted from Warren, I think. I think the biggest issue in regards to that is with the clearing of land and the rising of the water table. In other words, the water is subsumed into the ground much more rapidly. It can affect people's septic systems and the drainage on them. I think right now, I don't know who's familiar with it, but I think the Massachusetts state government is actually calling for a very serious upgrade, and for most people, a replacement of all the septic systems on Cape Cod
Yeah,
at this
I know
point.
there's
that's-
something
that's-
going down
And
the
I
Cape.
think, and that's because, again, the nitrates are leaking into the ground faster than they normally would, and they're getting into the surface water and the groundwater and causing problems. But again, a lot of these, I think, are more oriented towards land clearing rather than agricultural land, which in our particular case are cranberries, and they have a very well-established drainage to the bogs.
And my other thought about the wells was, should it say, if we're going to go with this particular statement, should it say residential wells instead of just wells? Because I'm thinking maybe some people have wells on their property that is not for house use.
But if you're watering your vegetable garden or the cranberry bogs and you're using contaminated or water that hasn't been properly filtered, then where does that leave that? Where does that leave the commercial aspect of that? That can ruin agricultural for years, and the cost to the individual residents for replacing a well is prohibitive. I think we paid $14,000, and that was 8 years ago for our well, so.
Well, yeah, but we don't see any contamination coming from the panels, that's the thing.
Right,
Well,
but
it's not necessarily coming from the panels. You've still got concrete going into the ground, you've got the poles.
rising water tables,
Yeah.
and because most of the people in Carver use shallow wells, somewhere around 30 feet deep, most of the water that used to fill those wells comes from close to the surface. It doesn't come from 200 feet, 300 feet down at the aquifer level. That's just being filtered by 20 feet, maybe, of the earth around it and surrounding it.
Well,
Bruce, can I jump in?
yeah, sure, go ahead.
Please.
So I had a nice conversation with a hydrologist for UMass. He's a USDA guy, stationed down at the Cranberry Station. And I mean, we talked for probably an hour or so. We talked about the stormwater issue, and he said that's probably his biggest concern about this, is if you're clearing trees, but where you have a really good stormwater drainage plan, he says that's probably not a non-issue. He said on a cranberry bog, not an issue at all. He had no concerns whatsoever. In a cranberry bog, you have the vegetation staying right there, so there's no erosion problems at all. We also talked, and Connie brought this up about lead being in the panels, and he said with the panel not broken, he says there shouldn't be any type of chemical coming out of it. He says if the panel is broken, that would be the highest risk of lead going out, but he also said that in a case like that, it would probably not even be measurable, the amount of contamination coming out of it. So he was very supportive, and I mean, he and I have had arguments before over things, and I love that because we get right down to the nitty-gritty and really understand what the issues are. So he's not afraid to tell me the truth, so. But very interesting conversation.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, so if we've got, regarding the setbacks from wells, so right now, if solar is in a rural or residential agriculture district, it's got a 200-foot setback. So we've got a 200-foot setback, so it seems like...
From the property line.
Yeah, so it seems like someone's well who's on their property is going to be, plus 200 feet, even if their well is like right on the edge of their property, they're plus 200 feet.
But if they go for the reduced setbacks.
Yeah. So like I said, I don't see, really, this looks kind of like a belt and suspenders sort of thing to me. They're already set back 200 feet. We want to say, make sure they're set back from, those, whether we say in residential areas, up to the group, but, considering the setbacks we've already got, this seems like a belt and suspenders sort of thing, where will say you can't do it because they won't do it anyhow because just of the physical orientation of panels versus.
Now, how would
other
this
people's
affect, as John started to say, how would this affect if somebody waived the 200-foot setback and said, we would allow the solar panels to be, field to be 50 feet from our property
I think in
line?
that point, that's when we fall back to this, like, yeah,
Okay.
they might waive that setback, but you still got to stay X feet away from somebody else as
Well, can they waive this too and say, we don't,
The planning board
we,
can
we,
waive.
it's fine with us?
Well, I think the intent is to make sure that, we're protecting somebody, and typically when we do a site plan for something, we ask for those things that are adjacent structures and things like that. So that requirement of noting where somebody else's well is on the abutting property would be something that would probably be best for the applicant to include in their plans. So whether that we want to say that, other setbacks in a residential or agricultural district, in a commercial district, that's going to be, there's smaller setbacks or something like that. And if you're in the commercial district, chances are you're probably on a smaller site and you don't have necessarily room for a few acres of panels and the well and everything else on your site. So to me, it seems like, well-intentioned and it's a belt and suspenders to me, but.
Yeah,
up to
right,
the board.
right. Yeah, it's just kind of redundant. But on the other hand, I guess it's all right with me. But the thing is like Steve said, we should differentiate this from, a cranberry bog setting.
Also, Bruce, I was reading over the SMART program, and there are absolutely no incentives for a site that has been cleared. All the incentives are for dual use, over cranberries, over water, canals, things like that. So there's no incentive to go with cutting down trees.
We could add a statement on, about a waiver. It's more about allowing the people to know that this is happening. So I'd be more than happy to waive at the property owner has the right to waive that
Okay.
particular section, much like we do with the setbacks.
I don't think that should be negotiable. I mean, if you think about it, that property owner says, okay, 2 years later, sells his property, and property owner B now steps in and says, hey, this stuff is so close to my well, what's the deal?
You don't buy the property. It's already there.
Yeah, it should already be there, or it should be disclosed in the sale of the property anyways, any waivers or variances on the property.
But that's not a variance on the property. That's not a waiver on the property.
No, it's not.
That's a waiver for the building site.
But the
Yes.
title
That's-
companies nowadays, they go through every piece of paper. They go to the town hall, they go to the courthouse. They're going to expose the waiver that went with the site plan. And I'm all for property owners, under the law, being allowed to do what they want for their property. And if someone owns a house and they want it, it goes back to what we talked about with the setbacks. If they want to sign the waiver for whatever reason, because it makes sense to them, it's their property.
Well, then there should be a hazard warning along with it.
But there's
What
no
hazard?
proven hazard
What
yet.
hazard?
There's no proven hazard.
Not by anything by the Mass DOE. There's
Okay.
no hazard.
I
This is also DEP, it's DOE,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's environmental protection as well.
Yeah, as Fran said, it's
It-
by,
well, you know what?
Buyer
It's,
beware.
and it's better safe than sorry.
I mean, I bought my lot in '74. It's a half-acre lot. People, we have wells and septics.
I bought my
all
lot in
around.
2017, and there was supposed to be,
Yeah. But
there was
what I'm,
supposed to be some notifications, and there wasn't.
but what I'm saying is that now it's an acre and a half. And the reason for that is they wanted to spread out the wells and the septics, and there was concern about what was going into the soil. But does that mean that I can't sell my house anymore? Do I have to have a statement saying,
Now you need an acre
I mean,
and a
it just doesn't, I mean, if somebody wanted to buy my house, they'd have to realize that it's just a half-acre lot, and it's not an acre and a half, 2 acres, so it isn't as modernized as as the new ones. So, I mean, it's just the buyer, whoever buys it has to realize that, that's all.
So what do we like about, is there anything we want to,
Well, I think Connie did say that, it should say that, well, pretty much anything can be waived, I think. I mean, I haven't seen any kind of regulation that can't be waived by the planning board, but I don't know.
so some language to the effect of other setbacks unless waived as discussed above
Yes.
shall be. So if you want to
Yeah.
waive that, the same process we use for those other waivers.
Allow the
Yeah.
allow the property owner to waive it if he
So
if he
other
wishes it, I
setbacks
mean.
unless waived.
Under 3580.25A.
358025A.
Yep.
I can't believe I remembered all those things in a row. That's what you're supposed to do to make sure your brain doesn't melt when you get older. So one anti-brain melt for me. All right, so now can we move on from that to the next page, glare. So glare, the solar PV modules to be positioned in such a way there's no possibility of glare on a residence or public way at any time during the day. So I want to refer back once again to the DOER document that we just talked about. So in their section on glare, a question, how important is reflectivity and potential visual impacts from solar projects, especially near airports? Bottom line, solar panels are designed to reflect only about 2% of incoming light. So issues with glare from PV panels are rare. Pre-construction modeling can ensure that the placement of solar panels prevents glare. Under the more information section, solar panels are designed to absorb solar energy and convert it into electricity. Most are designed with anti-reflective glare front panels to capture and retain as much solar spectrum as possible. Solar module glass has less reflectivity than water or window glass. Typical panels are designed to reflect only about 2% of incoming sunlight. Reflected light from solar panels will have significantly lower intensity than glare from direct sunlight. An analysis of a proposed 25-degree fixed tilt flat plate polycrystalline PV system located outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, showed the potential for hazardous glare from a flat rate PV system is similar to that of smooth water and not expected to be a hazard to air navigation. Many projects throughout the U.S. and the world have been installed near airports with no impact to flight operations. United Kingdom and U.S. aircraft accident databases contain no acts of accidents in which glare was caused by a solar energy facility was cited as a factor. When siting solar PV arrays, pre-construction modeling can ensure that glare is placed in a way that minimizes any potential glare to surrounding areas. So I don't recall, and I know I included it in the Kingston reg. I don't know, do we have anything in our regs currently about glare?
No. And all I can say is that from our very first solar panel field that we encountered, there was always questions about glare, and we found that there was no glare by people that came to speak about that. We also had one in South Carver off of Route 58 where there was a helicopter facility which is no longer there, and that was a big question, and found that there was no glare there was no regulations about solar panels and flying and anything like that. So I have never heard anybody complain about glare. I have never seen glare off any of these solar panels. So I don't really think that this is needed. I just don't think that it's anything that we deal with. There is no glare.
If I might suggest that in those application materials that someone brings to the planning board, that we add one bullet, the applicant shall provide a pre-construction modeling of glare. I mean, these are things at one point, there was probably a guy with a sextant out there looking for things, but I have a feeling these days there's probably a software package that most people have that could produce a pre-construction glare model.
Sure, I mean, to make everybody happy.
Yeah, let's,
we could do something
put it
like
out
that.
there and show us, what you got.
Under the required documents, could you put in a line that says, the siting of the PVC arrays, or when siting the PVC arrays, pre-construction modeling will ensure the panels are placed in a way that minimizes any potential glare. So use that exact sentence, but put it in the pre-documents.
Yep, in the required documents.
Yep.
A through
So
I.
that the modeling is done.
Yeah. And, I mean, it does say in the DEP document that they're designed to reflect only about 2% of incoming light, which is very low.
Yeah.
So once again, there's been, I would venture to say that this is probably something that most solar operators have got in their bag of analysis. Because obviously they're looking at where the sun's at. So
Right.
I think, requiring that pre-construction modeling and plugging it into those things is probably a good practice, and I don't think it's onerous.
No, it isn't. But the other thing, I was talking to Tom this afternoon about this, and we have screening too. So there'd be screening. There'd probably be fences. A lot of times you don't see the solar field at all. But I suppose it's not unreasonable. It could be included in the engineering talk when it's presented to the planning board about what the glare would be. And there's no harm to that.
We need folks to know that it's been considered.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so we'll plug it in, pre-construction, what was the Commonwealth's term there? Pre-construction modeling regarding glare. And I'll plug that into those requirements. So then we've got mitigation measures. So we've got a couple things here. On page 8, we've got in green at the top, that is the information that I brought over from Falmouth. So this is regarding land clearing, solar erosion, excuse me, land clearing, soil erosion, and habitat impacts, and now contains the pre-construction conference. So a clearing of natural vegetation shall be limited to what's necessary for the construction and operation and maintenance of an LGP, all those letters, or otherwise prescribed by applicable laws, regulations, and bylaws. That's what it currently says. So not more than 2 acres of forest land can be deforested for any one ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation. The planning board may allow an additional deforestation of up to 4 more acres or 10% of the lot, whichever is less. But any deforestation allowed in excess of 2 acres, the planning board shall require mitigation, such as the permanent conservation of open space and or reforestation and or off-site of at least twice the area of such excess. Now, this is something we did in Falmouth in 2021. It went to the Attorney General, passed muster with the Attorney General. Originally, the bylaw was just 2 acres was the max. And then when an applicant came in, petitioned town meeting, went to town meeting about this mitigation for additional potential clearing. That's where this language came from. And
What are the setbacks in Falmouth?
100 foot. So if you're in industrial area, it's a standard 35-foot setback. But where the property abuts residentially used or zoned, or residential or agricultural used or zoned properties, or conservation property, they require that 100-foot undisturbed setback.
Okay, so you can, if you have a 2-acre site, you need to have 100 feet
100 feet around, no disturb.
around it. Okay, so we have a 200-foot setback.
Correct.
So
Unless waived.
2 acres is not very big. 2 acres is 300 feet square is a little bit over 2 acres. And with our 200-foot buffer around it, the lot would have to be 11 plus acres to get 2 acres of solar. And I think that, I know you said the Attorney General said that was okay, but I just think this is, it's very, very strict. And I'm concerned that something like this, if it becomes too much for the Attorney General, that something like this will kill off everything else we've done here.
But aren't we allowing them to ask for up to a 50-foot setback in regards to that? Wouldn't
But they
that?
can say no. They have to sign a waiver to get 50 feet. But if everybody around it says no, first of all, they have to begin with the answer being 200 feet. That's where they have to start. Because if they're not going to get the answers from the abutter saying waiving the 200 down to 50, then they need 11 acres to put 2 acres of solar in.
Well, I must have missed something. So, in this case, we're talking about if somebody's got a site and they want to put solar on it,
Right?
all they get to clear is 2 acres. So if you want to clear more than 2 acres of your solar site, then you have to do this mitigation is what they called for here. So I'm not sure where the setback, I'm kind of confused on where the
Well,
setback.
if they want to clear 2 acres, that the border of those 2 acres have to be 200 feet from their property line.
Oh, yeah, yeah, so they
So
can't.
that's what this is.
They can't clear up to the property line.
Right, they have to leave 200 feet all the way around. So for a 2-acre solar display, they need 11 plus acres of land, which just seems to me, we're killing any kind of hope. No one's going to come in and do that if they have to buy 11 acres for every 2 acres of
Well,
solar.
to
But
Steve's.
that's the way it is right now.
No, we don't have a limit on
We don't
how
have a
much.
2-acre limit.
We don't have a 2-acre limit. We have the 200 feet.
Well,
Yeah,
On-
but
on
you're
clearing the
saying
trees.
that you
Right.
still need 11 acres.
but the 2-acre limit is saying you can clear 2 acres. If you want to clear more than 2 acres, then you've got to start planting some more trees.
Then you need to buy more property.
Well, they have the opportunity to put in
If they come in right now,
conservation of open space.
if they come in right now and there's no setbacks, they have to buy 11 acres.
Yes, yes.
The economic size that they're looking
You're right.
for, the
Yeah.
solar
You're
guys are
right,
looking
right?
for is 5 acres.
If there's no waiver for setbacks, right now, they have to come in and buy 11 acres. It's not stopping anybody.
But they're not restricted to 2 acres of solar. They can,
We're not restricting them to 2 acres of
They
solar.
can put as much solar as they want on the site. But if they have to clear trees on the site to put additional solar, that's that limit of 2 acres.
all right, so for instance, where Makepeace did out on Federal Road, they would only be able to do 2 acres instead of the 8 or 10 or whatever they've done.
Did they go in and clear the whole site?
They cleared a lot.
That's too bad. Yeah, and and that gets back to sort of the mitigation measures, and I thought the things that are underneath of this came from Medway, but we'll get to those from
Okay, yeah.
where they came. So, no, this is essentially, as Steve said, solar has, the state, and through their incentives, has said, if you're going to come in and take out trees to put in solar, we're not funding you. We're not giving you anything from the SMART program. And a lot of these deals, as we've talked about and heard from the solar company, why are they coming here? Because there's land here, it's affordable land, and they don't have to clear a lot of stuff. Because that's where the market, and particularly the government side of the market, those subsidies that are helping to get to that point. So we see less and less of these, and in fact, on the Cape last year, the Cape Cod Commission came out and said, we will allow nobody to clear trees to do solar if it has to come to the Cape for a development of regional impact. So, I guess my point is that there's not an incentive for it. We want to encourage people to go to places where the solar's already at. And if you're going to a place that's maybe marginal and you've got a good spot, but one side of it has some trees that are a little close to your panels, you might get to clear some of those trees, but you can't clear any more than 2 acres of that to enhance your site. So yeah, if you got a green site, nobody essentially, market-wise, government-wise, is encouraging folks to cut down trees for solar.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how that went with the Meadow Street project, the one that went to court, and then that's going to be built now.
Yes, that's going
Yeah.
to be built, yeah.
So, but that was, they were going to clear a large area of
10 acres.
of trees. Yeah.
10 of the
Yeah.
12, I
But
thought,
that's,
yeah.
that's unusual. I don't know what the incentives were at that time, but now that the incentives have changed, the latest, I mean, some of them, like you come into different scenarios, but we did have one where the solar was on the cranberry bog and into a sand pit, and they, in order to kind of square the project off in the sand pit area, this was by Bunny's Road, they cut down trees there, but I don't think it was a large, it was just a small portion of trees that they, so, I mean, that's another scenario that, where they would cut trees, but like, say, if the incentives just to go on the cranberry bogs themselves, or sand pit areas that have already been cleared, I mean, that's the most desirable place, to go.
Yeah, and one grower made that sand pit area into hay,
Mhm.
so that they could harvest the hay, so that's a good project.
Mm.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that this, so when we get to the mitigation,
That's going to be 48.
when we get to the mitigation measures next, I just referred to what Medway has that we're going to talk about next in the battery energy storage, and their mitigation for carbon loss and sequestration of forest habitat is pretty consistent with that. It basically cites forest land, designate unprotected land on the same lot equal to the size of 2 times the total area of forest is eliminated, cut, destroyed, or otherwise disturbances of installations. Such designated land shall remain substantially in natural. Well, what I thought I was going to point out quite rapidly wasn't there, so we'll get back to that when we get to batteries. But so we got 2 acres as a maximum to clear. That's been suggested. We're hearing from the marketplace and the state that they don't want people to clear anything. So I think it's a marginal clearance of that. But let's take a look at the stuff that Connie's got here in yellow, because they're kind of related to that mitigation of loss of sequestration of forest habitat. So
What if there's a 100-acre parcel? Can you go 4 with these bylaws? Or 2, I should say, clear 2 acres? And then skip a bit and clear 2 more?
Yeah, but you'd be losing more than, right? Because as with the chart he showed, it's better to go with,
He can't hear you, kind of.
I'm sorry, with the chart Savory showed, it's better to increase the side of your solar panels than it is to be skipping, because when you start skipping like that, then it's costing you more in setbacks than it would be to make a larger area into solar panels. Because he used an 11 acres, but if you go to 13 acres, then you're getting 4 acres of solar panel.
Because you've already got this.
Right, because the area of the solar panel is going to be larger, and it concentrates it more in a a smaller area. So currently, at 100 acres, I believe we allow 60% I think it's maximum
60
site density.
Yep.
Greater than 20 acres is up to 60%, 66% of the
Where are you at,
receiving lot. Sorry?
Where are you at?
I am at page 6, section 3580, 25.2 maximum site density.
2580 point,
25.2 on page 6.
Three-fifths of the way down.
maximum site density.
So if you had 100 acres, you could do 66% of it, but on cranberry bogs, it would be one thing a lot easier to deal with without the tree clearing. But then if you were to take 100 acres of forest land, that 66%, a lot of that, if you were to go for the maximum, would go towards mitigation measures. And that's how it differentiates between,
All right, but to Roger's, I guess Roger's question really is that if you did have a 100 acres lot that was all forest, you could only put 2 acres of, you could only clear cut 2 acres of it.
No, you could-
Regardless of the size of the lot.
you could clear cut as much as you wanted, but that's why the mitigation measures were in place, we're requesting the mitigation measures. So if you had 100 acres and you wanted to clear, say 66% of the lot, 66 acres of it, then anything over 2 acres would have to be mitigated in some point.
That's under
So-
our current or our proposed?
Well, the mitigation measures
Is
would,
under our proposed?
right,
Yep.
would address the forest land. It wouldn't address cranberry bogs, because those aren't considered
not covered.
forest land.
That's right.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, so right now, it says, clearing of natural vegetation shall be limited to what's necessary for construction, which is pretty vague. So adding that 2 acres makes it a little less vague, that clearing of natural vegetation is limited to 2 acres unless you mitigate for more. That was my intent in adding that in there. So when we get to how much of the site can you develop? If you got a 100-acre site and you want to put solar on it and it's covered with trees, well, that's not a suitable site for solar. And this gets back to the thing that I read a couple years ago from Mass Audubon that said 13 acres of Massachusetts forest land is lost every day to development. A quarter of that to solar. And this is a lot of that early days Western Massachusetts stuff where people are just going out and clearing things, and sometimes converting farmland, but sometimes just, woodlots and stuff like that. So we've gone from the maximum 2 to you only get to clear 2. There's no incentives to clear more. And if the AG says your thumb's too heavy on the scale, they'll tell us. And to your point, Savory, if the AG doesn't like it, they won't throw the whole thing out. They'll go out and just line out the things it says. We take objection to this particular language in your bylaw and this particular language. So we'll likely do a line item on it.
Well, can I just also, from the way I'm reading what you put in here, and Roger's question about the 100-acre lot, it says 2 acres or up to 10%. So technically, the planning board could allow 10 acres cleared, but with the mitigation, if it's 4 times, 40%, if we go with the 4 times.
I just, this was a copy and paste.
Right, right.
I
No,
think Tom's
whatever.
is a little more
Yep.
reasonable.
So it actually would allow someone to clear 10 acres?
No.
No.
No, because it says up to 4 acres or more, or 10% of the lot, whichever is less.
Oh, sorry.
So 4 acres
So the
is...
max is 4.
And
Sorry.
and during this conversation in Falmouth, we're having conversations with the Committee to Save Cape Cod and a few other folks about carbon sequestration. You know, you're going in and you're cutting down mature trees, to Connie's point, putting in, pollinator species, as we talked about before. They are not going to have the benefit of a 100-year-old tree as far as carbon sequestration, is holding that carbon. But at least you're putting something in place and you're discouraging people from taking those things down. And in that case, the folks for the Association for the Preservation of Cape Cod, I think I got it right this time, are like, they begrudgingly leaned in and went, oh, okay.
Well, this was one of the arguments that Meadow Street.
If you could talk into the
I'm
mic,
sorry.
please. So-
Sorry, this was one of the arguments that the Meadow.
We're trying, Mary Ann, we're struggling.
Just bend over.
Just trying, just getting too relaxed. Let me just pick it up.
You never say that in the government building. Go ahead.
We're gonna have to get lapel mics. But the Meadow Street project, one of their comments was as far as the reason why they wanted to cut down so much is because it was a 1-for-1. Just because you're cutting down the trees and you're replacing it with solar, it's a 1-for-1 benefit, and that was part of their argument. So, are they now? Is the government now saying that that's not the case?
I wouldn't have accepted that
Because this
argument.
was, I didn't accept it, but they're claiming that this was something that was produced by Connecticut. And that's what Connecticut was allowing. If you're cutting,
in Connecticut
if you're
now.
putting in 10 acres of solar, then you can take out 10 acres of trees, and there's no
They're
change in
calling
the
it,
carbon footprint.
they're calling it an equivalency.
Yeah, and we see those numbers all the time, that, this solar project is going to be sufficient of replacing, is going to take out so many CO2s from fossil fuels that people are using somewhere, and it's like planting 10,000 trees. But they're not planting 10,000 trees on the edge of your property. So, yeah, we see those offsets all the time, but at the end of the day, and I think the thing that's, we've kind of talked about before, nobody says you can only cut down so many trees to build a shopping center, and you can only cut down so many trees to build a subdivision. But they do say you can only cut down so many trees to do solar, and people go, well, that seems like a double standard, because this is, and the reason people said, well, it's because it's a green project. How's it supposed to be green if you're going to cut down all those trees? And basically people bought into that. So I think the idea of this is, you got a site, it should be an appropriate site for solar. You can make it as appropriate as you want, as long as you're not clearing more than 4 acres, in this case, of trees. 2 acres more so if you properly mitigate for it and plant other plantings.
Okay.
And that steers both from the marketplace and from our perspective to tell people, no, this is not a great spot for solar. Because frankly, I wasn't here when they did the Meadow Street project, but I would have been working pretty hard to make sure
Okay,
something
so.
like that didn't get done.
So, on this one, then, 2 acres of forest land can be deforested, and the planning board may allow additional deforestation of up to 4 more acres. So, does that mean that they could technically go in and clear 6 acres? If we so choose, they could do 6 acres.
Up to 4 more, that's correct, that is a correct reading of that.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure that I
Or
was.
10% of the lot, whichever's correct. So
Right.
we still don't get to 10 acres. You get to 6.
No, yeah,
So yes, you're correct, thanks for,
not on
Okay.
100.
Just wanted to make sure.
So one of the problems I have as a cranberry grower is, most of us cranberry growers have spent our life trying to conserve forests, and we decide that, yeah, we want to do a solar site now, and the conservation that we tried to do all along, now we get it stuffed down our throat, and we have to replant, we have to find 4 more acres of cleared land to put trees in. Is that what I'm hearing?
that's what that says.
Or to your point, the importance of conservation. Some of it can be used as permanent conservation or open space. and then it's guaranteed as being appropriately conserved for eternity.
But to that, what you were saying to that effect now, they're saying they're pushing the dual use and the water
And that is
and above
always-
water as well.
Yeah, and that is always our objective, to go the best possible way, but I still don't want a cranberry grower or anybody that has been holding on to their land and now they have an opportunity to put solar in, to have so many restrictions or have to do so much, the mitigation to put back 4 more acres of forest land. That's going to make it impossible for that person to.
Well, it says
Do
on
a
or off
project.
site. Now, keep in mind, this is their solar person comes to you and goes, yeah, I'm gonna have to take out 6 acres of trees. He goes, but that's okay, we'll mitigate for it, and if I can't mitigate it on site, we can mitigate off site.
Where would off-site be?
Well, the first thing that I think about are those panels that are right up there on the street. Yeah, if you're gonna have to mitigate for some tree cutting, put a few rows of trees along 58 between those panels that seem to annoy just about everybody who drives down 58. So there's opportunities, off-site. Maybe there's a municipal project, maybe there's a conservation project,
Well,
maybe there's typically there's no shortage of folks who you can find a spot for something like that. But the bottom line is push solar to the most appropriate site.
And I agree with that, that's personally.
Now, we just did the transfer of development rights last year, and I would think that buying the development rights and putting that land into conservation would allow that too, wouldn't it?
I can't process that.
Okay, so with the transfer of development rights,
I remember that.
yeah, there's certain lands that the town felt was important to maintain, streetscapes and
Yep.
various other things.
Sending areas.
Yep, sending areas. You could buy the development rights for those sending areas and put it in a conservation restriction, and then those development will never take place on that area. I would think that would
Yeah, but
help the
if I
town.
may, then that's implying that the cranberry grower who has been doing conservation all his or her life, but now has a chance to put in solar panels and needs to cut down more than 6 acres, has to go buy those development rights?
Well, it could be part of their property. It could be part of their land. There's no reason why it can't be. There's no reason they can't offer it to the town as conservation. But you keep saying cranberry growers that have worked so hard for conservation. Now, if the bottom line of that is
I
the
kind of take
conservation,
offense to
then
how you said that, kind of whiny there.
what are you taking offense of?
Yeah, the way you said that, cranberry growers want to go I'm a little concerned.
What I'm saying is, if conservation is really the point, then this is conservation. This is helping to maintain our habitats, our groundwater, and more importantly, again, if that's the bottom line, is that cranberry growers are doing this to ensure conservation, or they've been conserving their lands, then this would be a bonus. It should be an incentive to save or
So
conserve lands.
So my point being, if we have to mitigate and it increases the cost, it makes the solar company look at that site and say, no, I have a much better site, and they lose their opportunity for that extra income to keep the farm going. So that's what I'm saying.
And then we'd get a subdivision.
Yeah, well, I don't see this as having to buy anything. I see this as having to plant stuff, plant trees. So you don't have to buy land, you don't have to buy somebody's development rights. You got to buy plants, you got to buy trees, and you got to plant them somewhere, either on your property or
Yeah.
on another piece of
And
property.
Tom, I just bought seed for bee habitat for a ½ acre, $1,000. So it's really expensive. And it's going to be prohibitive for someone who has an opportunity to put in solar. And like I said, I myself, I wouldn't take down the trees, but I don't want to take away an opportunity for a farmer or anybody in that type of category, so.
Yeah, I know that we've done something like this in the past. I mean, we had, actually, it was the site off of Meadow Street that went to court, and there was a discussion about setting up a tree fund. There wasn't anything in the bylaws to actually make the solar company contribute to a tree fund, so we asked them if they would do that voluntarily. And so I believe there was talk about that, and I'm not exactly sure what happened, because then it went to court. But come to find out, I guess the tree fund had never been set up. This was 2 planners before that had talked about this, and a tree fund was never set up, and there were no donations made. But I mean, I don't know how something like this would work, really. I mean,
Well,
I think it really restricts the cranberry
I don't know, when you're talking about,
bog
when
owners.
you're talking about the cost of having to do the mitigation, when they're clearing, what are they doing with the trees when they clear them? They're selling them.
And see, I don't look at it as the cranberry growers having to bear the cost. I look at it as a solar company.
Right.
You know, they go into it knowing that this is part of their cost of
Yep.
coming into our town and doing business and
Yeah.
taking down our forests.
I know when I was looking at having solar installed in my house, the solar company that wanted to lease my roof was going to have to come in and put some extra braces up to put it. They were all willing to do it. Everybody was willing to put in the extra work into my house to make sure that I could put solar on my roof. So as far as it's not that big of a, if a company that wants to put solar there, they're going to make it happen.
So what happens is these solar companies come in, they look at the properties, and if you're next to a neighbor has no trees over them, they're going to go to them before they go to you. And in the case of these larger scale solar, you're tapping into the grid, only has so much capacity. So your next door neighbor is going to get that project if he doesn't have trees, which may or may not be the right thing, but in this case, this person's going to lose out because there's a better site just up the road.
So we're going to let everybody deforest land in the hopes that a solar company comes out and puts some panels down?
We need to have that flexibility so that they're not losing out on an opportunity.
Well, if they've got cranberry bogs, they do have the flexibility. Dual use. If they've got a pond on their property, they've got waterborne.
I just don't want to
it's-
take away their opportunity. That's what I'm saying.
So want to make sure that they have every opportunity instead of just a couple of opportunities.
I don't want to
Well,
restrict.
I think
folks.
it's more important that, to Tom's point, that neither the state or the federal government is looking to subsidize
Right.
deforestation of land. I think
Well, my point, as I mentioned last week, is to build out of South Carver. I don't know how many, I haven't checked it, but there's a lot of Form As on Wareham Street, Tremont Street, Federal Road. These farmers have been working those areas and taking care of the forests for a lot of years. Now, if they get in a financial bind, which a lot are now, Form A, you just go in and sign the paperwork and start building. And that scares me. as
I
I
think-
said.
I think we've already had several applications for those roads for subdivisions.
That scares me.
Yeah. Those are some of our scenic roads.
As I said last week, I'm worried about the school systems, the police and the fire.
Yeah, again, the build-out for this town is 50,000 people, and it's, at some point in time, that's going to happen. I would prefer it not to happen all at once, a slow and steady growth, but again, what kind of damage is being done by clear-cutting forests?
If I could interject here, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Roger, but I think the point is that, I think this is correct, that Massachusetts is the only state that has Form As. So if you have an existing road, that stands for approval not required by the planning board. So you guys don't have a choice. You just sign off on it. You endorse it, right?
It's
So-
called approval
so
not required, yes.
that's what
If you
the A
have the
stands
acreage
for.
and the frontage.
So they can go down Wareham Street, chop, 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 chop.
They can
chop.
do that today.
I
They can do
understand.
that. They
I
could do
understand.
that for the last 50
But let me
years.
finish. So a cranberry grower who's been farming 50, 100 acres, most of the growers in town have under 100 acres. I think it's only Makepeace probably that owns more than that. I could be off. But if they don't have the opportunity to do an alternative to subdivisions, and they need the money because things are in the tank, they're going to do subdivisions. And I think your point is, how costly is that?
That's not going to stop a Form A lot.
I'm not talking about Form As.
Well, I thought that was the basis of your argument.
They can do Form As now.
Right.
But they can also do subdivisions. And they can do tons of subdivisions.
And that's allowed right now,
There are
yes.
huge properties of land that right now are covered in forest. And I think there's more damage in some ways to the environment to put down all the pavement and the rooftops and the storm drainage that's going to go in when you see subdivisions up and down all our scenic roads. I think that's the point maybe Roger's trying to make.
Maybe, but are we going to talk about clearing? Are we going to put Form A lots into conservation land or are we going to clear them, put up solar panels, and then 20 years down the line, the lot's already been cleared and it's prepped for development? So that's one of the questions we have to look at too.
Well, down the line, I mean, the new road in South Meadow Road, Vaughan Estates, that went up in a matter of 2 years. I don't know how many houses there are.
Where's this?
Vaughan
Vaughan Estates across from the airport.
Oh, across, the 55 and older? No, right next to that.
Residential area.
Yep.
Bow Street.
Bow Street, Wade Street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a Cranberry company that
Yep.
was retiring, and they sold the property.
And that was their right to do so because it's in our bylaws, correct? It's in the state laws, it's in our bylaws.
Yeah, but you're not getting my argument.
Well, I'm getting your argument that a Form A lot, is a buildable lot.
Just forget I said
Okay.
anything about Form As.
a buildable
Form
lot.
As are stupid. I'm talking about what's worse than Form As are Form Bs, which are subdivisions. And I think that's what you're talking about. That went up in the course of about 2 years in the 70s. There's over 100 houses or more in there. And, I mean, I'm not saying that, obviously, having been the conservation agent, I am not in favor of cutting trees. But if I have a choice between a solar panel and a house lot, I'll take the solar panel. I think the question here is, how much do we want to limit it?
Right, that's my point.
That's the question.
Well, that's the thing that happened off of Federal Road when Makepeace came before the planning board. And they did cut they cut the forest to put in the solar panels. But the argument was there, well, I don't know if they ever said this, but it was in the back of everyone's minds that if they don't put solar panels there, then they could put a subdivision in there.
That's right.
And they had hundreds and hundreds of acres of land there.
That's right. And
So,
at that point in time, they had the right to put in 525 Form As.
Right.
That doesn't count how many subdivisions they could have done.
Yeah, I believe
On that land.
they already had a subdivision road proposed earlier. So,
Now,
so
Mike,
that's what, so they, and so the planning board looked at it. I don't know if you were with us
I
or
don't
not,
think so, no.
but there was, and I know that there's groups in town. They look, I mean, I looked at the forest, you know, the forest in that particular case, in that area, I mean, there were some trees, but the trees were very sick. And to cut them down, I didn't think was the worst thing in the world for the solar. But they did that in several spots on Federal Road.
now the question is, when the end of life comes from these solar farms, and I'm just going to use the one down on Meadow Street where they cleared 10 of the 12 acres, I think it was. Now that's 10 acres cleared. 25 years down the line, at the end of the life of the solar panels, what's going in there?
Well-
It's highly unlikely it's going to be more solar panels.
Well, but if this is going to be a continuous,
If things keep going the way they are, and
Yeah,
it's highly likely there
I,
will be more
thi-
solar panels.
I think that the solar panels will continue. I mean, this is supposed to be the new source of energy. So I think those solar panels will be there for a long, long time.
It's far
I mean,
more-
they may be replaced with maybe new technology, but I mean, I think we're kind of overthinking this thing, but what they can do 30 years or 40 years down the line. If you look at this, this report that Tom gave us, they said that the life of the solar panels is 25 to 30 years. So, I probably won't be here in 30 years, but
So,
Tom, did you have something to
Yeah,
say?
don't-
yeah, so back to the text here. So is the concern about 2 acres as a baseline, or not allowing more? I mean, what do
Well,
we
I was
think
gonna-
is that number that we should note there, rather than just having clearing natural vegetation limited to what's necessary? Do we want to put a number on it?
Could we take what is here, what you put in green, and take out the whichever is less? Because then if you have a 100-acre site, the planning board could give up to 10%, or maybe we go higher than that. And so if you've got a large site, the planning board has discretion based upon where the site is, what the circumstances are, to give a larger project.
But if you have 10 acres and you're limited to 2, and then all of a sudden your 10 acres is 6 acres of clearing, then doesn't that kind of defeat the ability of?
No, because it would be at the planning board's discretion. So if you have a 100-acre site, like we were talking about before, and they could go up to 10% or 15%, it would be 10 acres or 15 acres, which is a small piece of the 100 acres, but it could be viable enough for a cranberry grower or the landowner to make economic sense. Just, and maybe we can bang around the numbers, but not limit it to 2 acres or no more than 4.
I would support 5 acres, because that's the economic size of a large-scale solar.
So no more than 5 acres of forest land shall be deforested?
That's yes.
I think what we want to try to do here is to entice the clearing to be for solar as opposed to housing, right?
Right.
That's
Well-
pretty much what we want to do.
The problem there is when solar comes down, housing goes up, and the land's already cleared. So there's going to, in the 25 years, it's not going to be worth putting up the solar. There'll be advancements in solar at that point, maybe the highways, maybe your driveway, maybe there'll be solar panels over all the roadways. But what's going to happen is that land's been cleared, and then, for sure, whether the state has incentives or not, and it's unlikely in 25 years with Cape Wind and the various other projects going in that those incentives are going to be keep on going for the next 25 years. They're already cut down the incentives by quite a bit over the past 5 years. It's going to be buildable, it's going to be built on, and the land is already cleared, and that's how it's gonna,
Agreed, but at the same vein, that land can be cleared tomorrow and houses being put up. So what you're doing, you're gaining 25 years of green energy before the houses go in. Instead of the property owner saying, I'm selling to a developer tomorrow, I'm still going to clear all my property of trees and put up houses today instead of 25 years. I think we want to incentivize putting solar where we can to prevent this massive buildup of homes. Steve and I talked about this a little bit off the record a couple of weeks ago. The cranberry industry here, there's not, the age of the growers is getting older, and there's not that great a succession plan for a lot of the growers here. So they're going to want to be doing things with their property to reap some kind of benefit, correct?
Yes.
And that's going to happen sooner than later. So we need to incentivize them to have a choice of solar or housing where they're both about equal. And they
So
can
we
make
wanna-
it,
So we want to sit here and say, bring in the bulldozers and take out the forest and hope somebody comes in and puts solar on
no,
your property?
no, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that these growers are going to be selling all of their property, including upland, all their upland, in the next 5 to 10 years. And they're going to be selling them to the person who offers them the best deal. So if a solar company can only put up 2 acres of your 100, and a builder can clear 80 acres of your 100 and put up 40 houses, then he's going to go with that money, and then we have the houses and we don't have the solar, and the trees are still gone.
well, a developer couldn't come in and do that, but it just can't
But
be
he could do
done.
more, he could clear cut more than 2 acres if he bought 100.
Well, to some degree, we do limit it, and we do put a premium on 6-inch and larger caliper trees that are supposed to remain on site, so
It's supposed to be identified.
identified, but
Yeah.
10-inch in caliper is supposed to remain if we can. But that's not neither here or there. I think the cranberry farmers have land that is available for sunlight. Dual-use solar and things that are incentivized by the state. The state isn't incentivizing the destruction of forest habitats or loss of carbon sequestration. I think 2 acres is relatively where it should be. It goes from 2 to 6 acres. I think that's fair. There should be a benefit to the town. What does the town get when 6 acres of land are cleared?
So if I may.
Oh, what does the town lose?
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Sure. yeah.
So if we were to leave it between 2 and 6 acres, I think part of the issue, what I'm hearing from Steve is the mitigation, and I'm wondering if we can add a mitigation option here, of a pollinator meadow. I forget where I read that, but there's
Section B?
Yeah, that's probably what it is, yeah. So permanent conservation, open space, and/or reforestation, or reforestation, or a pollinator meadow, or on or off site of at least twice the area, et cetera.
Well, we require
Because that would
pollinators,
cost a lot less, I would
species
imagine.
to be sown around panels as it is. If that's not on a cranberry bog, it's required.
Well, we can use all the pollinator wildflowers we can get.
Plant those in between the solar.
Yeah. Yeah, and that could be, exactly, that could be done right on the site that was cleared. Just as a, an alternative, not an alternative, but in addition, this is something else they could do to mitigate.
Do we want to put the first number, 2 acres, to a vote? Just so we can get to the next line of the text.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to
Well,
be
I-
talking about this all night long.
I'd like to find out what Steve thinks is minimum.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, the solar economic size is about 5 acres that gets around a megawatt or a little bit more. So I think we need to kind of focus on that 5-acre amount. Otherwise, the mitigation's going to make it economically impossible to proceed or attract the solar developer.
Right.
And Savory, do you know if it's a 5-acre lot and it's got 200-foot setback around it, how big would the total plot have to be?
It would probably be around 15 acres, because you're going to add 3 more to the 2 that you're allowed. And then you're going to have, because the footprint of the array is going to be bigger, so will your buffer zones in length. So I would say, but it's not.
So you'd need 15 acres to
Probably,
do 5 acres?
Probably. That's what I was thinking.
That's
And-
30%.
And there's one other thing I just want to bring up with the 2 acres. And I had fun with graph paper today. And I looked up what the sun angle is in winter and summer. And on December 21st, the shortest day of the year, if you have a 90-foot pine tree, your shadow is 206 feet. A 2-acre lot is 300 feet. So more than 2/3 of your solar is not going to get sunlight in the middle of winter. So that is also going to make it.
Assuming
Not-
it's a evergreen and not a deciduous
Yes,
tree.
but that's primarily what's around
Yeah, I know.
here. You know, and they're old trees, they're almost 100 years old, or in their 80s and 90s, and they're that tall, they're 80, 90, 100 feet tall. So, again, this is disincentivizing a solar company from coming in. So I think if you get 5 acres, you can position it so that you're still going to have that 206-foot shadow, but a lot more percentage of your solar is going to get sunlight during the winter months.
So we got a bid for not more than 5 acres of forest land? Can I
Well,
say that?
I think part of the problem is here that 200-foot buffer zone isn't a tree zone. We only require that it be shielded from the roadway systems and the neighboring houses. That 200 feet could be open land or meadowland as far as I'm concerned, or bogs or roadways, as long as it's not public roads. We only require probably 25 feet of screening of trees within that.
But your array still has to be 200 feet from your property line, regardless of what's there.
But you're just taking it for granted that that's all forest land, and that's generally not necessarily the case.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that you still need the 200-foot buffer. Even if it's concrete, you still need the 200-feet buffer. So you still need 200 feet around the 2 acres, which means that you have to have 11 acres of property to do that.
To do two, yes.
Yes, that's all I'm saying. So I think we should make it 5.
Can we take a vote, Mr. Chair?
Sure. Do I hear a motion to go from 2 acres to 5 acres?
So moved.
So Sarah Hewens made the motion. Steve Ward seconded it. Let's go around because
Well,
we
5 acres
okay,
of
for
what?
further discussion.
5 acres of what? What are we talking about?
No more
Are we
than 5
just-
acres of
2 acres
forested
changes
land.
to
We're just going to change, no more than 2 acres of land shall be deforested for any one ground installation. And then what? Are we going to allow additional deforestation, or what if?
But we
you-
haven't gotten to that line yet.
I know.
I'm just trying to get to line 1, and then we'll talk about line 2.
I
Okay.
think that probably can go away.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote. We'll start with John Gatsky.
No.
John
Mr.
says
Shea says nay.
Aye.
no. Bruce Mackey, aye.
Aye, Roger Shores.
Fran Mello, aye.
Sarah Hewens, aye.
Steve Ward, aye.
All right, so we now got 5,
Up to?
no more than 5 acres.
No more than.
Of forest land shall be deforested for any one ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation. The planning board may, let the games begin. The planning board may what?
I would,
May allow additional?
I would take that whole next sentence out. And I think we should establish 5 acres of what? 5 acres of 15 acres?
Forest land.
5 acres of 15 acres, or 5 acres of 6 acres, or what are we gonna,
Not more than
5
5 acres of forest land.
up to what percentage?
Well, that's where you get the question, where you come back to your maximum site density, which is
So-
66%.
No, it's 66% if you're over 20
Okay,
acres.
so then it's 50%.
So let's say it's 50%. So all of a sudden, it's 50%. And we already know from both our conservation agent and the testimony from the hydrologist Horsley, that 50% is critical. It is a critical change to the environment. So where does that work into this? No more than 25% of the acreage, so you'd need 20 acres to put up 5? And it's limited to 5?
So then that contradicts the maximum site density, which states 50%, unless we specify,
Land clearing,
yeah,
which we should.
yeah.
Yeah, so maximum density, 50% of the lot, but that assumes that you can use 50% of that lot. So,
Right.
50%, if almost all of it's clear, then fine. But if 50% of that lot has 10 acres of trees on it, you only get to take 5
You only
out.
get to
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
down 5.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that seems
so
to be
you'd have to
clear.
have 10
So
to do it, yeah.
I understand what you're saying, Connie, but if you've got a 10-acre lot and you've only got 2 acres of trees in a 10-acre lot, you need your buffer zone, your trees are all in the middle, even under your scenario, you can still take the 2 acres of trees down. So I think you gotta look at the worst-case scenario, which would be a fully forested lot. And on a fully forested lot, say we said you need 15 acres, which means if you're gonna take down 5 acres, which is the max, you're taking down 30% of the lot.
Which is what I'm looking for. I'm
Which
looking
is
for a
within the
number.
guideline,
It shouldn't.
which is within the
it's-
hydrologist.
Right, but if we're clearing land, it should be within the percentage of a guideline. So if we're talking about clearing forested lands to put up 5 acres, then at what point does it become a detriment to the town? At what percentage?
What if-
And you're saying 30%. I was thinking more like 25%, but the numbers are relatively close.
And the planning board doesn't have to give the extra
There's no extra.
ability
I
to
would.
clear. You're taking that up.
I would, if we're going up to 5 acres, we're already at the maximum that we would have allowed otherwise, so I think that that should be removed, and that the 5 acres should be quantified as a percentage.
But does the
Up to 5
density-
acres to be no more than 25% of the available acreage.
Yeah, the other way around. Yeah, you can remove no more than X percentage to, up to a maximum of 5 acres.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm looking
Yeah.
for. I'm looking, I
So
I
we need a
need-
percentage.
Yes.
That, I mean, you've got 50% in the maximum site density. You feel that's too much for forested areas, right?
It's
Because
not
of
me,
the-
it's
I know, yes, it's that.
That
it's what
doesn't-
the
that doesn't-
Right,
agent said.
I would think that
I
25,
think what
any,
Fran was saying is that wouldn't apply to forested areas. That 50% is for other areas. When
That
it
would be
comes to
for
forested areas,
open cranberry
it's
bogs.
only 5%.
All right, so.
Meaning 5 acres.
5 acres.
Right.
If it's forested, it's no more than 5, but you could develop on property that's not forested.
Right.
Right, but we're
Up
talking,
to 60 or whatever.
we're
the-
talking about limiting what we're gonna clear for forestation.
Yeah, that's all,
Yes.
that's all we're doing.
Yes.
And we should have a percentage of the forested land to be cleared. So if you've got 100 acres of forested land, well, we'll
You'd
say
only be able to
20
clear 5
acres because
acres.
it's a more reasonable number. And you wanna clear 5 acres. I would think that that 25% is reasonable, because the other 15 acres are going to remain forested land. Do you see what I'm saying?
No. I mean, if you have 100 acres and it's all forested,
You can only clear 5 acres.
Right, but then,
Why would you want
Right,
them
but
to?
if you have 6 acres, you shouldn't be able to clear 5.
right,
Okay, well, okay.
that's
That's true.
kind of my issue there, is, if
But
we're
you're
going to be
saying-
clearing,
but
what
you're
percentage?
But he's saying in order to do that with the buffer zone, you need how many acres?
you need at least
Well, yeah,
15.
but to your point, it doesn't all have to be forested. So there's a delineation here between forested area
Right.
and lot. And that's what this is for.
Yeah.
This specifically says 10 acres or 2 acres right now of forest land shall be deforested. So we're talking specifically about forest land, not about the entire property.
Right.
So I think what we need to do is come up with a percentage
Of forested
of
land.
forest land per lot that can be removed up to a maximum of 5 acres regardless of size of the lot.
Okay.
Which would, I would think would be a 25 or 30% would be of the forested land, would be under the
Yeah.
critical mass that the Conservation Commissioner and was echoed again, well under that.
So the question is, what
Interesting.
percentage of forest land can be cleared up to that 5 acres?
Yeah.
Steve, what is the approximate, you might know, or Roger, you, the approximate size of people's, of growers' property these days?
60 acres?
About 60? Okay.
60.
Is it 60? The
All right,
average,
so if we go to a 30%, that up to a maximum of
I'm
5
not sure. What
acres,
do you
that's
think,
not going to impact most of the growers.
right, 30% would, I think would work. 25, that's cutting it close.
Well, they're cranberry growers, so out of those,
Well-
say 66 acres, what acreage there is open space already
Right, but
for
there are some growers
agricultural
who,
use?
there are some growers who don't feel that dual use is good for them. They have a choice.
Exactly.
But they also have upland where they can put solar. So they may choose to deforest as opposed to using the dual use. No one's putting a gun to their head saying you have to put it on your bogs.
So
So-
typically for every acre of bog, there's 2 acres of support land around the bog.
Yeah. So I think that we should maybe just change the motion to saying not more than 30% of forest land up to a maximum of 5 acres shall be deforested for any one ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation.
I'll second
Uh,
that motion.
I would put it to the lot, because otherwise, if you say one ground, you can put a ground mounted here, you can put a ground mounted here, you can put a ground mounted. So, to the lot, rather than to the solar.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm trying to figure out the best way to say that. Right after maximum of 5 acres per lot.
Of forest land shall be supported.
No more than 30% of forest land up to a maximum of 5 acres per lot shall be deforested for any one ground mounted. Is that okay?
That's, yeah.
What do you mean by lot?
The property,
Parcel.
parcel. We can say parcel instead.
Parcel lot, yeah.
Parcel. The property that the person owns, regardless of whether it's a grower or not. It's just whatever.
No, I
property.
understand, yeah.
All right.
So not more than 30 acres of forested land up to a
30%.
maximum.
30%.
Pardon?
30%.
Sorry, not more than, you see that little symbol in there. So not more than 30%. It's up past my bedtime last night, sorry. So not more than 30% of forested land up to a maximum of 5 acres per lot may be cleared for any one ground-mounted solar.
Yeah, shall be deforested, yeah.
Deforested, that's important.
Yeah.
As opposed to clear.
When I
And
get a
so-
good night's sleep, my typing isn't any better, by the way.
And so then are we getting rid of the last sentence?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good.
It just makes it simpler.
So all that stuff's going away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does make it simpler.
But I don't want people going out and clearing land and saying that it was already cleared. Do you understand?
Yeah,
that?
oh, yeah, I know.
Well, and I tell you, one of the things we put in the bylaw in Kingston, which the Attorney General has now shot down, is about this thing about you can't clear your land beforehand. You know,
Oh.
the stipulation that any property that's been deforested 5 years prior to is exempt from, the AG's already said that's not a thing you get to do. So that's why it's not in here. All right. So, awesome.
All right, so we've got that squared away?
Yep,
All right, thank everybody for that.
it's a mitigation measure.
Yeah, I think we did some mitigation right here. So,
Tom,
Good.
we keep in for ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation, even though we say lot, I think, right? So after deforested, even though we've said 5 acres per lot.
That'd be
at the-
deforested for,
Any
After
one
deforested.
ground
Mounted solar.
mounted.
Yeah,
Photovoltaic installation.
for any one ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation.
L, S, G, M,
That was
S,
easy.
P, I.
Now, there's a quick one we can handle, because on page 8, 3580.34, panel maintenance, I wanted to add the words "or stored on site."
okay, wait till Tom gets
Yeah,
things
we're there.
straightened out. You're good?
Fine.
Okay, Tom's good.
I'm just the guy who's writing things down.
He's a fast typist, okay. So,
So we're good with that? Or stored on
types
site.
much faster than I could.
All right.
All right, what was, where was that, Connie?
Oh, page 8, under panel maintenance, any and all materials used for maintenance of the large-scale solar or other structures shall be properly disposed of, and no harmful chemicals shall be used. And I added the words "or stored on site."
Okay.
So we're good with that.
Does that wrap that up? Nope.
I want to go back to the very first thing that we talked about in yellow on page 4. There are things in here that are repeated right below it. For instance, D on yellow, proposed changes to the landscape of the site, including grading vegetation. If you look at B, underneath that, in black and white, it says proposed changes to the landscape of the site. So there are...
It's already there.
Yeah, so I got to clear up the duplicate, so.
Yeah.
So yeah, Connie pasted the yellow in over top of the black and white.
And yeah, again, some of it is reiterated, both, well, I didn't realize it was under here.
Yeah,
but,
so I just want to make sure that we only say it once.
Yes, no, I agree.
Right.
Okay.
And it's kind of out of order.
Okay.
Just a second. That's just my note to remind me to clean that up. All right. Very well. And I don't think there's anything else that we've introduced into this that we haven't covered tonight. All right.
Are we good? Should we go on to the battery storage?
That'd be swell.
Tom, do you have a copy of the battery storage with you?
I do.
Okay.
how many notebooks you would have.
There are several.
I know at our last meeting you gave out pictures of different type of battery storage units.
Yeah, so just for a brief refresher, in the battery storage bylaw, there's Tier 1 and there's Tier 2. So Tier 1 are essentially smaller battery storage facilities that essentially contain under 1 megawatt hour of storage. And so what I brought to the table, so people understand the difference between the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 that requires a special permit. These are those things that we would see for a Tier 1. And these would be typically something you'd see on a commercial site or something like that. So this is a 1 megawatt battery. It usually is in a 20-foot shipping container. So that container is 8 foot by 20 foot by 8.5 foot. And the application for something like this would be if someone decided they wanted to have this as in addition or instead of a diesel generator for backup. So let's say that Shaw's decided they want to make sure their stuff doesn't freeze when the power, or doesn't defrost when the power goes out. They might opt for something like this. So this is something that would be located on a site. If somebody was building something new, they'd come to the planning board for site plan review because they were building a building, and this would just be a component of the site on the site plan. It doesn't require a special permit. It's just an ancillary product for the property. So also in Tier 1, when we get smaller, so that half a megawatt hour is essentially a 10-foot by 10-foot cube. That's a 500 kilowatt or a half a megawatt container. 10-foot wide, 8-foot long, 8.5 foot high. And then the smaller ones, 100 to 200 watt, is essentially this cabinet that's 9 foot wide, 6.5 foot tall, 8.5 foot deep. And then the smaller one is essentially a small panel, 7.9 wide, 3.6 deep, and 8 foot high. So that's what a Tier 1 structure looks like. So
Are we gonna, personally, I don't think it should be by right in all zoning districts. I think half a megawatt hour should be allowed for, residential, even though, a half a megawatt is.
right. Well, I wanted to get into the nature of the bylaw,
no,
and what we're
sorry.
talking about before we get into those locations sort of things. So I said this is the Medway battery storage bylaw. As I said, Medway has spent a lot of time and a lot of energy on figuring these things out, and we've just been mining their site for the stuff that they've produced. So this is based on Medway's energy storage systems. So I said Medway, they hired these consultants to do this work. They've created a specific bylaw and created a dedicated zoning district that's on the edge of town near power lines, as far as the district where they put those things at. In Montague, which is a place that town council had suggested we take a look at because it had been through some things with the AG, they use existing industrial power lines, and they are allowed in an existing industrial use. Those Tier 2s would be permitted only by a special permit of the planning board, and only and in their case, only within this specific industrial district. And so I've mentioned, for the sake of comparison, the Cranberry Point battery energy storage is 150 megawatt hours. So it's considerably bigger. So we're talking about something like that. If somebody else comes along and says, I want to do a big battery facility, these things are typically co-located near substations. In a meeting the other day with the folks about battery chargers, car chargers that we're looking at putting in town, they also did some battery work, so I chatted up them a bit about, the location requirements to see if, was I close to being on track. And he said, yeah, they're typically by those substations because the power that you have to run from the battery site to the distribution lines, he says the cost is $3 million a mile. And very few people are going to spend $3 million a mile to run line from someplace that's not near a substation. So we have a substation in town. In looking at the property and the improvements that they're doing right now on the power lines from here to Kingston, that recently in front of the Board of Selectmen, there's no substation proposed for that. So whatever we decide to do with battery energy storage facilities, I think it's highly unlikely that we'll see another battery storage facility coming here, because that's the juice that they need. They need to be that close to something. Or somebody who's got crazy deep pockets is going to pay $3 million a mile to run a line from somewhere else. So we may wind up with the battery storage energy bylaw that nobody's ever going to come to the planning board for, because the one spot that they can go is already used. So with that caveat in mind, that brings us to what the folks in Medway have proposed.
Can I ask a question first? Battery storage associated with solar. Some of these larger arrays, what size battery storage capability do they have there?
I don't really know, but I can take a look and find out. But as we've heard, when a solar component, most solar developments we are going to see are likely going to have a battery storage component to it over a certain size. So this is battery energy storage, is not necessarily related to solar. That would be a product of the solar development that comes into the board.
All right, I think that should be made clear.
Yeah.
So the purpose of this bylaw is to advance and protect public health, safety, welfare, quality of life by creating regulations for the installation and use of battery energy storage systems with the following objectives: to promote a regulatory scheme for location, construction, and operation of battery energy storage consistent with best practices and safety protocols, to ensure compatible land uses in the vicinity of areas affected by battery storage systems and to mitigate any potential impacts on abutting and nearby properties, and to 3, mitigate the impacts of battery energy storage on environmental resources such as agricultural lands, forest, wildlife, wetlands, and other natural resources. This section shall be construed to be consistent with state law, including but not limited to the provisions of Massachusetts General Law 48, Section 3, and state regulations, including but not limited to the provisions of the state building code, state fire code, state electrical code. And if any conflict in the provisions of this section in the provisions of state or general law, the state laws and regulations shall prevail. So, applicability: this requirement of the bylaw shall apply to battery storage systems permitted, installed, decommissioned, and modified after the effective date, including general maintenance and repair. Battery energy storage of this bylaw are only related to those that exceed the following capacities. And I did not go to find out what the size of a lead nickel battery was, or these other sizes, because most folks are going with lithium-ion batteries these days. So a battery energy storage system shall be subject to this bylaw is classified as Tier 1, Tier 2, we talked about that. Tier 1, as the system has an aggregate capacity of under 1 megawatt hour, and if in a room or a small enclosed area, it will consist of only a single energy storage system. Tier 2 will have an aggregate energy capacity of greater than 1 megawatt hour or consist of more than one battery storage in a room or enclosed technology. So to your point, I don't know what sort of clarity we need on that, but it's certainly something I can ask town council about. Because as we know, if the town says, a guy brings a solar thing in and goes, here's my solar thing, I got to have X size battery in here. And the town says, your solar's fine, but you can't have the battery. Then your thumb is on the solar scale, which the state has said, you can't do that. You can't prohibit the solar development because we're requiring them to have a battery as part of the solar component. So that's sort of my logic for how to differentiate between the two. But I could be sadly mistaken.
A quick question. Can we specifically differentiate between household use because, well, Tesla's household batteries, and like you said, somebody might want, one of the smaller containers to replace a generator type deal. Could we have, where are we on that? I know Tesla's like, 11 or 12 kilowatts?
Yeah, so these are everything I showed you is largely a commercial application. Things that are smaller, and I've got pictures of those that I didn't bring, but that Tesla battery and those other batteries that are in someone's house, those are residential use, and under the building code, they're considered appliances, like a refrigerator. So if you want to have a storage battery in your house, it has to comply with fire code and electrical code. It's an appliance in your house. So
At what point does it go from appliance to commercial grade? I'm guessing it's 0.5 megawatt hours? Or 60?
Yeah, I'll drill back down to what the number was for the residential ones that I saw, but they are, we're talking about a power of about 10-ish.
Okay, yeah, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so we're not close.
I don't want confusion,
Yeah.
Yeah, the home battery systems, you're not gonna see much more than 10 kilowatt hours.
10
You
or
might
maybe
see
20.
12 for a pretty large setup, but the idea is that backup power is to power the house while there's no sun. And in the event of something catastrophic, it can run the house. I think a 10 kilowatt battery can generally run a house for, they plan these things out to be able to run a house for about 3 days without solar, charging it up during the day. At least that's what they were doing with mine. I haven't gotten the battery yet, but.
Yeah. So this small one is 60. And those things are crazy expensive. I don't have a number for what crazy expensive is.
I'm sorry,
but-
Tom, 60 what? Kilowatt
60
hour?
kilowatt hours, yeah.
Okay.
So unless you're got a ton of jack to spend on a battery, you're going to go with the Tesla or those things that we see, something like this. There's outside units I've seen in the pictures I looked at, and they look like sort of the bottom part of your barbecue grill. Where the propane tank goes, that they're essentially about that size. And you've seen them on patios and things like that. But no, there's a world of difference. So I basically put these pictures up because those are sort of the commercial applications that we might see them at. But as far as in your house, there's no thing in this bylaw that's going to say anything about having energy storage in your private residence. It's an appliance. Follow the building code, follow the fire code, follow the electrical code, and you're good to go. So here in the battery energy storage, they get into the general requirements, talking about the building code. Right now, it says Tier 1, and we'll get to flush back to that. Right now, it says Tier 1 battery systems are allowed by right in all zoning districts subject to applicable provisions of state electrical and fire code. They're subject to minor site plan review or provisions as such as the bylaw is applicable. And under Tier 2, that's when we get into the bigger ones. And in the bigger ones, we'll look at what is that zoning district they should be in, likely industrial. But likely the fact that there's not a power line that runs by an industrial district, it's kind of hard to see that. Like I said, we're going to see more of those on the larger size. So utility lines, circuitry, signage, lighting. So setbacks. So this is typically the meat of where we get into our discussions at. So Tier 2, once again, the big one which we may see one of these days but may never see again. A battery energy storage facility should be set back a minimum of 50 feet on all side, rear, and front lot lines. Except that Tier 2 BSS shall be set back a minimum of 100 foot from the side, rear, or lot lines that abut or are across the street from residential zoning districts or existing single, two-family, and multifamily structures. The minimum setback shall include a buffer area of at least 15 feet wide along all property lines. Access drive and parking allowed in the setback areas, but shall not intrude into the required buffer area. In addition, a minimum of 10 feet must be attained between each BSS component and all buildings stored combustible materials, hazardous materials, high-piled storage, personnel means of egress, and other exposed hazards not associated with electrical grid infrastructure. So 50 feet from all sides is what they're calling for in Medway. If you're in a residential, and you're butting up against those family sort of structures, 100 feet.
Why wouldn't it follow the solar and be 200 feet in residential?
I don't think anybody in the room is going to fight you if you say that, Fran.
I just,
It shouldn't be in a residential area to begin with.
I don't think anyone would.
Well, where they abut.
Can we go back to number 4?
Shouldn't even be close to a residential area.
I hopped over number 4. So can we do setback and come back to 4, Roger? Is that
Yep.
okay? So those larger systems, like I said, which we anticipate are going to wind up in industrial, in an industrial district. So those tier 2s are 100 foot from the side and front line that abut residential zoning district. So at some point, the zoning line starts and stops. So if you're in the industrial district and you're abutting the industrial stuff, setbacks are the setbacks. But if you're that last property in that district, then those are the setbacks that apply. And Fran suggested if it's abutting a residential area, 200 feet.
500.
I gotta say, Fran, I agree with
Sorry,
you.
I don't like them. As far as I'm concerned, they should be a half mile away from anything residential, but
What did we do at Cranberry Point? That I know we had discussed this. We must have had, I can't remember what setbacks we used there.
I don't.
use the
Probably
standard
200.
building code setbacks as best as I can figure out.
Yeah, I don't recall, but I think that's, whatever we did there, we don't want to do it again.
Well, I'm just saying about the setbacks. Yeah.
I don't recall. I can look it up. I should probably know that by now, but.
Yeah. But it was probably 200, I would say. Yeah. I don't think I have any objection to that.
So energy storage will set back a minimum of 50 feet from all sides, except when it abuts
Yeah.
residential. Do we want to make it 100 feet from anything? That top line where it says a minimum of 50 feet. Do we want to make that 100 feet on all sides and 200 feet from residences?
I don't know if I quite understand that. So a two-tier.
So right
battery-
now, it says for the big one, for Cranberry Point 2,
It's a two-tier,
it's the 2-tier.
yeah.
It says 50 feet
From the lot lines.
from the lot lines.
So in industrial, it would only have to be 50 feet from the next industrial lot line.
That's what it says right now.
I think tier 1 should be included in that. I mean, some of these are as big as a tractor-trailer truck.
I agree that there should be setbacks for tier 1 also. For
Most-
residential, if they're in residential
Well-
agricultural area.
Yeah, and most tier ones are gonna go along with this solar site are gonna
Right.
be that 200 anyway, so.
Right, right. But we were also we're discussing with Tom about how does it go, say, like a supermarket in town wants to put in a battery storage. So how is that going to work with the setbacks?
So it's going to have to be so far away from their building, so...
It
10 feet
says
from the
10
building?
feet.
10
It would have to be 10 feet.
From their own building, yeah.
Did somebody already find that for me? Where's that?
It's
Oh,
at the
are we
bottom.
talking
Bottom
tier
of page
1?
3,
Thank
Bottom
you.
of 5.
last line.
A minimum of 10 feet must be maintained between components in all buildings, stored combustible materials, etc.
But how about property line?
Property line is 50 feet, 100 feet if it's residential. Although,
In this, but we just changed it to
To 200
200 feet. But that wouldn't,
so at Stop and Shop,
I think
you
we-
got to put it it's got to be, that battery container you're going to put is going to be 10 foot away from your building.
Right.
And everything else is going to be inside the setbacks from the property line.
Do you think 10 feet is enough?
No.
I'll ask the fire department.
It's contained too. And all the cells are separated from each other.
See, I don't know anything about them, but I would want the fire department's, kind of input as to how far away, if this thing does catch on fire, which is everybody's fear, how long is it, how combustible is it to the building?
I think the bigger concern in this industrial and commercial applications would, a car accident or truck accident or forklift accident causing problems, I think. But again, it goes to the safety.
Right, is 10 feet away from the building far enough? And then, but is this only for tier 2? What about tier 1?
That's
Well-
tier 1.
No, I think we're in, it says setbacks.
This is tier 2, yeah, correct.
Isn't it, are we talking about over at Shaw's or something?
Yeah, but I don't think what we're talking about right now would
That's a
appear,
tier-
would
that's a tier
apply
one.
to a tier 1, which is what would be at Shaw's,
Yeah.
correct?
Correct.
Now, you were proposing to double the limits that were currently in here for
Well,
tier
like I said,
2?
we just went through a discussion about making the setbacks consistent with solar
For the tier 2.
for the tier 2.
Yeah. So maybe the ones that are in here, number 5 for setbacks, could be consistent for tier 1 batteries.
So,
So setbacks, rather than say tier 2, it would say any?
Well, I would think for the tier 1 batteries, I would think that maybe the ones that are listed are reasonable, depending on what the fire department would have to say.
For tier 1, and then upping the setbacks for tier 2.
Up into the solar setbacks.
Yeah.
So somebody decode that for me.
So tier 1 would stay, setback shall be set at a minimum of 50 feet from all side, rear, and front lot lines, right? And
Right,
then
existing,
a
the
minimum
existing language for
of
tier
50
1.
feet from, in a resident, 100 feet, sorry, 200 feet, no, sorry, 100 feet, the way it's written,
Yeah.
for residential. And then tier 2, those would double.
So tier 1, battery storage shall be set back a minimum of 50 feet on all sides.
Mhm.
Tier 2
Be 100.
shall be set back a minimum of 200 feet. Is that what we just said?
No.
Yeah.
No, the
200 for residential.
the lot lines would be 100, but 200 for residential, for tier
Yep.
2.
Mm.
But I would also want 200 for
that's what it looks like in
residential
one of them
for
catches
tier
fire.
1.
And that's only a
Because
tier,
something
that's a
like
tier
that.
1.
Tier 1, okay.
I wouldn't want, I'd want
Do we
that
want that right next to the
at the
building?
same
I don't
setback
think so.
as the solar project.
So
So
you-
you indicated something like this might be on a large solar project.
Well, what I can, is those sort of things would be potentially for a commercial venture, for somebody's business, whether it's, a liquor store, whether it's Stop and Shop, whether it's,
But would something like this store energy at a solar project?
it could.
So I would ask that if this type of battery, a tier 1 battery is used outside at a solar project, that it also maintain a 200-foot setback like the rest of the project from residential.
Yeah, it's absolutely going to, because that battery's,
After one burns.
Accessory solar.
yeah, so that battery's gonna be, basically in the solar array here.
Okay,
it
so
would
it
be-
would
Yeah,
be,
so the battery storage, just, basically you put all your stuff by your arrays,
Is that the monorail?
and then
Yeah,
you've got,
that's the portable.
the line, it transports
That
the
was-
power from the storage unit or whatever through the power line out somewhere else. So all that stuff, that battery's gonna be
And they
located
had, 1
essentially
and 2
next to the
megawatt
solar
that
fields.
caught fire as well.
in a solar development, as I see. So we got tier 1 battery storage should be set back 50 feet on all sides. Tier 2 should be set back a minimum of 200 feet.
Residential.
And then check our number about the minimum.
Yes.
Because they might want to get around the whole.
Yep.
But that's up to the fire department too. You could say a minimum of 10 feet. But, I mean, the fire department, I mean, when I was on the planning board, we always ran all this stuff through the fire department, all these
And
type
then
of
they-
projects, and they would tell us what they would be comfortable
Yeah.
with. And we always did
Yeah.
whatever they
Wasn't it like
suggested
20 or
is
30
what we
feet
did.
clear on all sides?
Yeah.
Something
Well,
like
if we're
that.
doing a new bylaw, why not just reach out to them and say,
Yeah, I'll talk to Jesse tomorrow.
what do
What's-
they want to see?
Where do you want it at? How far do you want it away from buildings and all that stuff?
It might depend upon the type of battery and how large it is and everything else too, so it's kind of variable. But, but it certainly wouldn't hurt to ask them.
Would there be any legal ramifications if our bylaws precluded a company from utilizing battery storage if they wanted to?
If we said Bob's batteries can't come to town in our bylaw?
No. If you, most of our commercial is along Main Street, and they're not very deep lots. And there are some lots that are not even 100 feet off the road. Those lots would not be able to utilize battery storage if there is a 200-foot minimum from
The next
residential.
Oh,
Think
the
about
residential.
Cumberland Farms up at Plymouth Street.
Yeah, that's.
They couldn't do it anyways.
Well, but they would not be allowed to by this bylaw. And
Well,
I'm just
that-
wondering if there's any kind of, if the Attorney General would look at that and,
Well, all the stuff that we're gonna do, we're gonna send to our attorney
To KP, yep.
and see what, and they got a pretty good relationship with the Attorney General's office. They
Okay.
have pretty well regular conversations about things.
all right.
So whatever we write up, and like I said, I don't think that the state has the thumb on their scale on batteries as they do on solar. And I think, as I said before, some of the things I previously wrote for solar probably wouldn't pass muster with the Attorney General now. So if we're gonna put something in there, let's put it in now before the AG gets too invested in, you
Yeah.
know, pushing back on how we locate those things.
Yeah.
Okay, I just was curious.
Yeah,
Some of
closer
the
we get to
smaller ones like
2035,
this, I
the,
think, should-
Worse it's gonna be.
So tier one is
Should be
50
more
feet.
available. Like,
So if you're at the Cumberland Farms, you gotta be 50 feet, unless you're, like I said, butting up to that residential. And most, as we pointed out,
Well,
most,
right
most,
behind.
most of our residential is one lot deep. And those lots typically aren't giant.
Right. But right behind Cumberland is
Yep.
residential.
Behind both of them,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and a car wash.
Right, which is why maybe some of the, like the small 60 watt or
Right.
60 kilowatt or 200 kilowatt as accessory structures.
Yeah.
It's once you start getting into half a megawatt or a full megawatt.
Yeah, I'm guessing if you don't have a diesel generator right now on your site, you're probably not gonna go out and buy a battery, because like I said, they're crazy expensive.
Yeah.
So Roger, you had a question about
Yeah, I don't quite understand for.
vegetation and tree cutting. Areas within 10 feet on each side of a Tier 2 battery energy storage system shall be cleared of combustible vegetation. So you're putting a battery down, you're clearing combustible vegetation or other combustible growth.
Up to what distance?
Within 10 feet,
10
areas
feet.
within 10 feet on each side.
That's my problem.
A pad around it, an area.
Yeah, that's my problem. I thought that's what it said.
So what,
These lithium, well, no, all batteries, but lithium especially with the chemical reaction of just a small atom like lithium.
Roger, can you speak into your mic?
Yeah, sorry. I'm always saying that. I'm worried about fire continuity. Where we're putting solar panels on the property I sold to them. They had their 10 feet, but next to that 10 feet with 70, 80-foot pine trees, and then houses.
Yep.
All right, if you have a fire, continuity will bring it right up into the tops of those trees, and that whole area will be gone in 10 minutes. So I'm wondering if,
So we want to make that bigger.
yeah,
Okay.
I mean, if you have a forest fire, I have,
Mhm.
it's pretty bad.
Okay. So areas within how many feet?
Yeah, what does the fire department usually call for to clear on all sides, Roger?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Minimum of 14 feet because they, right? Oh,
I
that's
think
to
it's-
get the,
I
I'm
think
sorry,
it's
that's to
more
get
than
their
that.
trucks,
truck in.
that's to get their
That's it.
trucks through.
But I think they like, I just wish I could remember, Bruce, do you remember? There's a certain minimum they recommend that's clear on all sides. I seem
We
to
haven't
remember
come into
30.
that because they've all been on the bogs. Most
Yeah.
everything's been on the bogs, all
Right.
these battery storage. We haven't had any just freestanding on somebody's lot.
That'd be another question for Jesse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because these lithium batteries can go up to 3,000
Ask fire.
degrees if they're in fire.
All right. So we're going to make that number bigger. Ask fire.
Yes, thank you.
All right. You good with green grass, ivy, succulents, the rest of the stuff that's in there?
I got no problem with the rest.
All right.
Now, Tom, if it's all right,
Yes, sir.
on number 5, in the middle of it, it says, "The minimum setback areas should include," I would prefer it say, "a vegetative buffer area at least X wide in order to screen," because these things do hum and they do make noise, but
So
in residential areas, more especially, the screening is important, but
So we're simultaneously trying to keep plants away from them, but also buffer around them.
well, not necessarily at the minimum setback area, which is going to be either 50 or 100 feet. I think they can put 15 feet of vegetative buffer in that area. That's
Yeah, my reading of that is a buffer area of at least 15 feet wide along a vegetated buffer. That's what you're saying, plug in vegetated buffer? I think that's a fine.
right for screening purposes.
We could do-
Sound baffling and
You know, we were talking about that, Tom and I, today, and, you know, we were thinking of this as sort of like a dumpster situation where we require a fence to go around the dumpster. I would think something like that would be appropriate.
Yeah, but you can't have anything within 10 feet, soon to be more, of the unit itself. So it would have to be farther away than that.
So you got nothing within 10, 20 feet. You got a 50-foot setback, and that first 15 feet from the street is going to maintain vegetated. So we got 50 feet from the street, first 15 feet is vegetated. And then you can put your battery in, provided it's X number of feet away from any structures or anything other combustible, is how I'm kind of scoping that out. I don't have graph paper.
No, I understand that. I'm just wondering about, you know, people who may want to put these into an existing situation where there are roads or parking lots, and, you know, they would then have to give that up in order to put the vegetated in.
we already require buffering of all parking lots. And I think it's 25 feet. And then it goes up based on the amount of parking spaces.
So we're comfy with vegetated buffer area, at least 15 feet along all the property lines.
If possible, maybe. You gotta allow some leeway, because there's all kinds of situations that are gonna come up. You know, it's sort of like at the discretion of the planning board.
So the next line, dimensional, shall comply with dimensional limitations, the principal structures underlying zoning, unless otherwise provided in this bylaw. So,
Now, tier 1 should also fall under section 2300, right? That's setbacks and usage chart. Or that might just be usage chart.
Okay, sorry, I was scrolling down to see something else. What did you say, Connie?
All the tier ones are, in some essence, a shed and should fall under the appropriate requirements that a shed would fall under.
Well, if you got a 200 square foot shed, you can put it right on the property line.
What?
If you got a storage shed and it's less than 200 square feet, you can put it anywhere in your property.
I thought there was a...
If it's over 200 square feet, then you gotta go somewhere.
I believe in Carver,
It's 8 by 10.
it's a shed, yeah.
All sheds
Any
require
kind
a
of shed, you
permit.
gotta be 10 feet from the property line
Yeah.
in Carver.
And it has to be behind the structure. It can't be in front of the structure.
Never should be.
It can be on the side of the structure.
Right, but it has to be behind the front.
Behind the, yes, behind the front
yard
line, yeah.
setback line. All right. So fencing requirements, tier 2, including all mechanical equipment, should be closed in a minimum 8-foot-high fence with a self-locking gate to prevent unauthorized access unless housed in a dedicated use building. Secure barriers, fences, landscaping, and other enclosures must not inhibit required airflow or exhaust from a BSS and components. Electrical equipment greater than 1,000 volts requires a separate and additional means to restrict access. NFPA, that's National Fire Prevention...
Association.
The A thing, I forget what the A is, association. 855 requires specialized safety systems to be provided based on the BSS chemistry and installed locations. And in the stuff I've been reading, there's a lot of discussion about the monitoring of these and sensors for the site. So the big thing that everybody's concerned about is thermal runaway. And thermal runaway is preceded by the venting of gases. And so the idea of the monitoring for these things is this monitor picks up those gases, and if those gases start to flare on the monitors, then they know to shut that system down because something's wrong with that cell. And that's sort of what they've learned on these things over the years and trying to figure out how they are. And so I think that that's where they're talking here about the NFPA and provided based on the BSS chemistry and the installed location. But I think it's a given that any one of these to get put in, whether it's a smaller one or a larger one, is going to have that venting capability.
It should also have a warning light. I think that's something Jesse went over with us, if there is, so that nobody opens the door if there's a runaway incident inside, and it allows explosive gases.
Yeah, I'm running.
But again, that's
Yeah,
something,
I'm running in the opposite direction about
Yeah.
that thing, making a beeper sound or something like that. I don't know.
we could, that's something we can run through
Yeah.
Jesse Boyle.
Yeah. So screening and visibility. Tier 2 battery energy storage systems all have views minimized from adjacent properties to the extent reasonably practical using architectural features, earth berms, landscaping, and other screening methods that will harmonize with the character of the property and surrounding area. Such features may not inhibit the airflow required or the exhaust from a BSS and components that must comply with the setbacks established in paragraph 6 above. And here we get back into mitigation and loss of carbon sequestration. This is where I thought you lifted that other stuff from the solar. But minimum loss for carbon sequestration in forest habitat. If land that is forest land or has been forest land within 1 year immediately preceding the filing of an application with solid tier 2, the plan shall designate thereupon an area of unprotected, meaning subject to GL Chapter 84, Sections 31 through 33 at the time of application, land on the same lot and an equal size of 2 times the total area of forest land that is eliminated, cut, destroyed, or otherwise disturbed by such installation. Such designated land shall remain in substantially in its natural condition without alteration, including prohibition of commercial forestry or tree cutting not related to the maintenance of the installation, until such time as the installation is decommissioned, except in response to a natural occurrence, invasive species, or disease that impacts trees and requires cutting to preserve the health of the forest. Comments, questions?
fine.
Mitigation for disruption of trail networks. Like I said, they took a deep dive in Medway. Mitigation for disruption of trail networks. If existing trail networks, old roads, or woods or cart roads are disrupted by the location of a Tier 2 BSS, plans shall show an alternative trail alignment to be constructed by the applicant, although no rights of public access may be established hereunder. And then mitigation of disruption of historic resources and properties, historic resources, structures and properties such as cellar holes, farmsteads, stone corrals, marked graves, water wells, or pre-Columbian features such as those listed in the Massachusetts Register of Historic Places, or as defined by the Natural Historic Preservation Act, shall be excluded from areas proposed to be developed for a Tier 1 or Tier 2 BES. A written assessment of the property's effects on each identified historic resource and property and ways to avoid, minimize, or mitigate any adverse effects shall be submitted as part of this application. A suitable buffer is determined by the PEB, I think that's the planning board, what they call it there, I didn't finish that reference, shall be established on all sides of each historic resource. So the furnace that we got, federal furnace that's on our seal there, that cannot be a battery energy storage facility because that is one of our beloved sites, although I haven't been there, sorry, it's been on my list. Batteries, failed batteries. Batteries. Failed batteries and modules cannot be stored on the site and shall be removed no later than 30 days after deemed failed by the BSS operator or cell module manufacturer. The operator shall notify the Carver Fire Department in advance if the battery or batteries used on site is to be changed. Decommissioning plan. The applicant shall submit with its application a decommissioning plan for Tier 2 BES to be implemented upon abandonment and or in conjunction of removal of the facility. The owner or operator of the BES shall notify the building commissioner in writing at least 20 days prior to when a Tier 2 BSS will be decommissioned, decommissioning or abandonment or discontinue. Tier 2 BSS shall be completed within 6 months after the facility ceases operation. The decommissioning plan shall include. And that is essentially what we see for decommissioning plans for solar as well. I wasn't going to go through all those line by line. Decommissioning fund. The owner or operator of an energy storage facility shall continually maintain a fund or other surety acceptable to the town in a form approved by the planning board and town council for the removal of battery energy storage system in an amount determined by the town for a period of the life of the facility. All costs of the financial security should be borne by the applicant. Proof of liability insurance. And then the site plan application we get into for Tier 2. So site plan application for Tier 1 battery storage shall include the following information in addition to that required by Section 3100, which is our site plan bylaw. A 1 or 3 line electrical diagram detailing the battery energy storage system layout, associated components, and electrical interconnection methods with all state electrical codes compliant disconnects over current devices. 2, preliminary equipment specification sheet that documents the proposed battery energy storage system components, inverters, and associated electrical equipment that are to be installed. Final equipment specification sheet should be submitted prior to the issuance of a building permit. 3, the names and address and contact information proposed or potential system installer and the owner-operator of the battery energy storage facility system. Such information or of the final system installer shall be submitted prior to the issuance of a building permit. 4, large-scale fire test data, evaluation information, and calculations and modeling data. For any of the following UL, that's Underwriters Lab. Underwriters 9540A, fire test data must be available to the Planning and Economic Development Board for review. BSS systems, the capacity of greater than 50 kilowatt hours. BSS system spacings between arrays shall be, greater than 50 kilowatt hours. BSS systems with space between arrays of less than 3 feet. And then the commissioning plan, and the commissioning plan is the opposite of the decommissioning plan. Before they get to turn it on, they have to go through this commissioning plan. The system installer or commissioning agents prepare a commissioning plan prior to the start of commissioning. Such plan will be compliant with National Fire Protection Agency 855 and documents and verify the systems and its associated controls and safety systems are in proper working condition per requirements set forth in the applicable state codes. Where commissioning is required by the building code, battery energy storage systems commissioning shall be conducted by a Massachusetts licensed professional engineer after the installation is complete, but prior to final inspection and approval. A corrective action plan shall be developed for any open or continuing issues that are allowed to be continued after commissioning. A report describing the results of the system commissioning, including results of the initial acceptance testing required by applicable state codes, shall be provided to the zoning enforcement officer prior to the final inspection and approval and maintained at the approved on-site location.
Can we go back to number 4, please?
Back to number 4.
Yeah.
Large-scale fire test data. That one.
So, can we discuss this, best systems with a capacity greater than 50 kilowatt? Best systems, what exactly are we talking about?
So for the most part, tier 2 are those that are larger.
The tier 1s fall into that category too.
Yeah.
I think the smallest.
So tier 2 were, tier 2 were larger than 1 megawatt hour. So this is
It looks like tier
50
1.
kilowatt hours, which is essentially, I'm not going to try to do my kilowatt hour math here.
Well, the one you showed us shows 60 kilowatt hours
Yep.
as the smallest unit for a tier 1, I believe.
Actually, that was point.
So what are we meaning by best systems with spacing between arrays of less than 3 feet?
Well, let's say the tractor trailer trucks, they might be, well, we're requiring 10 feet, aren't we?
Yeah.
I would think that 10 feet would be required between each unit, because each unit is a separate structure or...
Right.
So best systems with spacing arrays of less than 3 feet. So we want to make that less than 10 feet? Is that what you're saying?
I would find out what the definition of arrays is. It might be the actual the battery
The
drawers
battery
inside
okay.
inside the cabinet. So I would find out what arrays mean before we change that.
Well,
I'm glad
I mean,
we
it's
brought you in tonight.
it's our law. What do we want to call it?
Well, I think we got to use the technical terms.
Yeah.
for what
We have
they
to
are.
find out what it actually means
Yep.
first,
Right.
yeah.
So. All right.
And all this information goes to the fire department anyway. I mean, on 4, I thought that maybe we should include the fire department along with the planning and economic, see what we got, to the planning and economic development board
That
and
should change to
Carver.
planning board.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I got most of them.
There's
You know, I got most of them. Should be with the fire department,
Yeah,
planning board, and fire department.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Depending on the location of the BSS, oh, pardon, we just skipped over a part. Fire safety compliance plan. Fire safety compliance plan, such plan shall document and verify that the system and its associated controls and safety systems are in compliance with state codes, including documentation that BSS components comply with the safety standards set forth in subsection 3590.80. And I did renumber those. That is the safety section that we're going to get to here in a bit. Operation and maintenance manual. Such plans shall describe continuing battery energy storage system maintenance and property upkeep, as well as design, construction, installation, testing, and commissioning information, and shall meet all requirements set forth in the state codes in NFPA 855. Maintenance provisions will be driven by manufacturer requirements for the specific listed system. Number 8, depending on the location of the BSS in relationship to and its interaction with the electrical grid, interconnection shall be completed per 527 CMR 12. That's a Massachusetts regulation. System interconnection into utility grid shall be in accordance with NFPA 855. An accessible disconnect is required per 527 CMR 12. Once again, that state regulation. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, engineering documents must be signed and sealed by a Massachusetts licensed professional engineer. Sealed meaning a wet stamp on it, I'm assuming. Emergency operation plan. An emergency operation plan complying with NFPA 855 is required. A copy of the approved emergency operation plan shall be given to the system owner, the local fire department, and the local fire code official. For so long as the BSS is operational, the operator shall provide the fire department, police department, building commissioner, and town manager's office with contact information for personnel that can be reached 24 hours per day, every day. And this contact information shall be updated by the operator whenever there's a change in this information. The operator shall also be required to have an official representative be present on site not later than 2 hours after notification by the police chief, fire chief, or their designee. Permanent copies shall be placed in the approved location to be accessible to facility personnel, fire code officials, and emergency responders. The emergency operations plan shall include the following operations. A, procedures for safe shutdown, de-energizing, or isolating of equipment and systems under emergency conditions to reduce the risk of fire, electrical shock, and personal injuries, and for safe startup following cessation of emergency conditions. B, procedures for inspection and testing of associated alarms, interlocks, and controls, including time intervals for inspecting and testing. C, procedures to be followed in response to notifications from the battery energy storage management system when provided that could signify potentially dangerous conditions, including shutdown equipment, summoning service and repair personnel, and providing agreement upon notification to fire department personnel for potentially hazardous conditions in the event of a system failure. D, emergency procedures to be followed in case of a fire, explosion, release of liquids or vapor, damage to critical moving parts, or other potentially dangerous conditions. Procedures can include sounding the alarm, notifying the fire department, evacuating personnel, de-energizing equipment, and controlling and extinguishing the fire. E, response considerations similar to a safety data sheet, SDS, will address response safety concerns and extinguishment when an SDS is not required.
A quick question. Can we require training of the fire personnel in regards to that particular one?
I think we're going to get to that at safety, but
Okay.
Absolutely. F, procedures for safe disposal of battery energy storage system equipment damaged in a fire or other emergency event, including maintaining contact information for personnel qualified to safely remove damaged battery energy storage systems equipment from the facility.
I have a question on that. I
Sir.
think the soils should be checked also and removed if contaminated.
Procedures for, So procedures for safe disposal for equipment damaged in fire or other emergency event, including maintaining contact information for personnel qualified to safely remove damaged battery energy storage systems from the facility, to safely remove damaged battery storage and any contaminated soils, is what you're thinking, Roger?
Something like that.
Now, there should be a secondary containment system too, because if they're pouring water on these, it shouldn't be running right into our local.
Yeah, I think they kind of figured out they shouldn't pour water on
Yeah, they
these things.
don't.
Well, that's for lithium ion, but there's
No,
there's
that's
there's the
what
nickel
Jess-
hydride and
That's what our fire department, fire prevention officer, Jesse Boyle, told me. They don't pour water on them.
They learned.
on lithium ion because. Right, but
Yeah.
nickel hydride and some of the newer salt ones are gonna, you can put water on them to put them out, and that's,
And most of the times, the container itself has a halide system or something in it to basically,
That's
you know,
right.
immediately, you know, in the halide system. I know we had one on the Mayflower, on the crew of the Mayflower, and they said if there's a fire, don't try to get to the generator because there's a halide system in there that puts it out like that. And if you go in there, you won't come back out. So,
Now, we went all through this with Cranberry Point when it came to the planning board. And it's, they have raised floors and, automatic fire system that goes on, and everything is contained in that unit.
so we certainly hope that, but let's throw in any contaminated soils or any affected soils in that removal.
Sure, yeah, I mean, that's easy enough to test for.
Yeah.
Because if that was the case, then none of these battery fires would matter. If they all stayed contained, then none of these battery fires would matter.
Well, I
They'd
mean,
never
certainly
really-
under site plan and special permit, if the planning board thought that something additional was needed, like some sort of footings or some sort of containment under the storage units.
I was just thinking berms.
You could ask for that.
In fact, G actually says other procedures as determined necessary by the town to provide for the safety of occupants, neighboring properties, and emergency responders. So it kind of gives the town an opportunity to say, oh yeah, and that other stuff that we'd like to see you provide for us.
Well, like if the fire department looked at it and they said, no, we don't really like that setup, this is what we would like to see,
Yeah.
then that's what at the time when I was on the planning board, that's what we would do.
H, procedures and schedules for conducting drill of these procedures and for training local first responders on the contents of the plan and appropriate response procedures. That was your point, Connie. Provide training to local first responders. Ownership changes, if the owners of a battery energy storage system change or the owners of the property changes, this special permit will remain in effect, provided the successor owner or operator assumes in writing all the obligations of the special permit, site plan approval, and decommissioning plan. The new owner or operator of the battery energy storage shall notify the building commissioner of such a change in ownership or operator within 14 days of the ownership change. A new owner or operator must provide such notification to the building commissioners. Now, I think we had talked about something in solar that they need to notify the permitting authority as well. Did we put something like that?
Yes, we
the
did.
planning board and the
So
conservation
that owner
commission.
operator would notify the building commissioner and the planning board in writing.
Any boards that they had to get permits from.
And
Any permitting authority,
any
All permitted, no,
That's good.
Any,
any and all.
adjudicating authority, permitting authority, permitting as well.
Permanent.
yeah, but if they didn't have to come to conservation in the first place, they wouldn't have to come again.
Right.
It's not,
Well, and any permitting.
any relevant,
Yeah.
any relevant permitting authority.
Or any permitting authority from whom they got a permit.
Yeah.
From which, I guess.
Yeah. And any previously permitted. So a new owner-operator must provide such notification to the building commissioner and any previously,
Any permitting authority from which they received a permit.
any permitting authority
Let me see if I can find the wording.
from which they received a permit.
Mhm. That sounds good.
In writing. All righty. 358E8, go ahead.
I think with solar, we said that they had to meet with the planning board or any permitting authority as opposed to notifying. I'm not sure about that. I know that as far as conservation is concerned, whenever there's what we've initiated is that whenever there's a change in ownership, we want the old owner and the new owner to sit in the same room together so they understand, they hear the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, I
What?
think that's what we, I think
Yeah.
that's what we were talking about.
That's what I think we were looking for. So it's,
Shall notify the building commissioner and meet,
and meet with,
Permitting authorities.
yeah,
And the fire department.
well,
Well,
it could be, yeah. I mean,
I expect our building commissioner will pass it on, but
Right.
it's a redundancy thing. I mean,
a new owner or operator must provide such notification to the building commissioner and meet with any permitting authorities from which they received a permit.
I suppose the building,
Want to sleep yet?
they don't, fire,
Yeah, if I start snoring, hit me.
Notify the building
fire
commissioner.
department must have a contact list for
Yeah.
these facilities.
With
right?
planning, yeah, I mean, they work with planning to,
All righty. Safety. 1, system certification. A battery. It's not gin, I promise. System certification. Battery energy storage systems and equipment shall be listed by a nationally recognized lab, testing laboratory, or UL 9540 standard for battery energy storage systems and equipment, or approved equivalent, with subcomponents meeting each of the following standards as applicable. And these are those codes from Underwriters Laboratory, standards for batteries used in stationary, auxiliary vehicle power, or light electric rail applications. UL 1642 determines their standards for lithium batteries. UL 1471 or UL 62109 for inverters or power converters. D, certified under applicable electrical, building, and fire protection codes is required. E, alternatively, field applications by an approved testing laboratory for compliance with UL 9540 or approved equivalent in applicable codes. Regulations and safety standards may be used to meet system certification requirements. 2, site access. Battery energy storage systems shall be maintained in good working order and in accordance with industry standards. Site access shall be maintained, including snow removal at a level acceptable to the local fire department. 3, battery energy storage system components and associated ancillary equipment shall have required workspace clearances, and electrical circuitry shall be within weatherproof enclosures marked with an environmental rating suiting for the type of exposure in compliance with NFP 70. 359090 abandonment. The battery energy storage system shall be considered abandoned when it ceases to operate consistently for more than 1 year. If the owner or operator fails to comply with the decommissioning upon abandonment, the town may, after compliance with any applicable state and federal constitutional requirements, enter the property and utilize the available bond and/or security for the removal of a Tier 2 BES and restoration of the site in accordance with the decommissioning plan.
Under safety, could we get the, or maybe as part of the application process, material data safety sheet, and a list of any and all hazardous materials that might be in quantities?
Yeah, I think we added that in our list of goodies for solar as well. So that, SDS sheet. So they did talk somewhere up here about SDS, but I think,
And under abandonment, does anyone think that 1 year is too long?
I do.
I'd hate to think that the thing was sitting there operating by itself with nobody looking at it.
Well, you know,
I think that once it's been deemed not functioning or abandoned, it falls under large quantity generators. In this particular case, and the state requires a 90-day response. But that's not until it's deemed past its useful life or broken or no longer functional.
Or abandoned.
Or
I'm
Yeah, or
just
abandoned.
concerned that we, as a town, we would have to wait 1 year. Say they ran for 3 months, then they shut down for 6 months, then they ran for 3 months, for whatever reason. We finally get to the 1 year, and then we start the process of whatever that process is to try and get the area cleaned up. I just thought 9 months was a more reasonable time frame, where at 9 months, we could start the process, which would probably take another 3 to 6 months to get in.
Well, I would think if it's not operating for 6 months, you can reasonably expect that's the end of it. At that point,
So
There
even
should-
6 months, I don't know.
timeline.
I just think a year is a long time.
So we're gonna say that it's not operational for 6 months, or it's operating inconsistent?
Right, this says,
Because
Cons-
electronics,
well,
they can be inconsistent at times, and sometimes it takes a while to figure it out.
okay, yeah, well, 6 months, it's a very expensive system, you'd think they get on top of it,
You would think.
so
Um,
if it ceases to operate though, then,
Consistently.
yeah.
well, I mean, if it ceases to operate,
If it
No,
ceases to operate, 6
consistently
months.
is very important. Again,
Yeah.
as you know, the lithium batteries that we just started to use, been about 6 or 7 years. It's
Well-
when they do inconsistent things is where we get in trouble.
Yeah. But at the same time, if it ceases to operate, I would think that within 2 to 3 months, we're making a phone call saying, hey, what are you doing about this thing?
I would think 90 days. I think the
Yeah.
state requires something to be done within 90 days of,
Yeah. As far as
and then at least we'll
inconsistent
have,
operation, that's like, what we're saying over there is, that's something that could indicate that a fire is imminent.
Maybe after a year, we could dismantle it.
so I was just going back and plugging in that safety data stuff as one of those requirements up front, the safety data sheet.
Who would determine that it's not operating? Who would know that? The company, right?
Well, the company, I would imagine Eversource would know.
Right.
Right, okay. So I'm wondering if there's a two-tiered approach here. One, that if it's not operating for 90 consecutive days, that the operator is contacted. And to find
Yeah.
out what, maybe it is a consistency issue, but after 90 days, we contact the owner saying what's going on, and then figure out what the abandonment could be.
yes, I think that's reasonable, yeah. They should know immediately if it stops
Right,
functioning.
and that falls within the 90 days that the state says.
So if we're looking at this situation and it turns out that the company is bankrupt and they're going
You
out
don't
of
want to have to
business.
sit there for a year.
That's why we have a bond in place.
Yeah.
Right, I understand that, but,
You wouldn't want it to have to sit there for a year while you're
Right.
waiting for the
So
clock.
right.
another,
Yeah.
maybe another 90 days,
right,
that
waiting
point-
for, what I'm
To see if
thinking
it can
about
be
is some
fixed.
sort of notification from the company that they're filing whatever chapter they decide to file, whether it's restructuring or anything else like that, would require some sort of notification of that.
So a
'Cause
battery,
that could affect the monitoring and maintenance of the system.
so the battery energy storage system shall be considered abandoned when it ceases to operate consistently for more than,
What we're saying also, though, is that if the battery energy storage system ceases to operate for a period of 90 days, that we contact the operator to find out what's going on, or however we word that. And then,
so,
Then to make
so
a
this is
determin-
not abandonment, because we're just asking
no,
about.
because, but then that will give us an opportunity to
Declare abandonment.
declare abandonment without
but-
waiting a full year.
But to your consistently, if it's not, I would think 90 days consistently that something should be done. And then, again, if it's non-functioning, that would,
Right,
fall
but I think
under a
that they,
different
I think that they
category.
deserve the right to come in and tell us why it's not functioning. You know, there could be a real good reason for it, and they're
Yep.
doing something again. But if they come in, or if they come in and say, we're not running it anymore, then we start abandonment, or if they don't show up at all, we do
Yep.
that.
But I think all
That's
that's gonna go to Eversource first, right? I mean,
Well,
Eversource
it
is, they have to tell Eversource, well, we're gonna, whatever, I mean, the partner
Out of
with
money.
the. Yeah, I mean, no,
right?
yeah.
So,
I mean, how would we know that it's not working?
I would hope Eversource
Right, well,
would tell
that's
us.
what John said.
That's what I'm
Eversource,
Yeah.
would be the one
May-
to know that they weren't.
Is that something that we can reach out to Eversource about? Just say, hey, how would we know, or how would we get word that this thing's not working?
yeah.
And how do we know that there's not an emergency taking place over there, and they just all took off?
Didn't hit the bell.
Friday afternoon.
So I'm hearing you, but I'm not sure where we're plugging that in at.
I would hope that there would be some sort of monitoring system connected to our emergency.
Oh, absolutely.
Right,
I cannot imagine
Yeah.
that there's not, because the fire department's going to go.
Exactly.
Right.
We don't want to just have a light flashing somewhere behind the stoppy shop.
Yeah, we've
Right.
gone through this before.
Danger, Will Robinson. For those people who remember
Yeah.
Will Robinson.
Somebody calls up their buddy who calls up a friend who happens to be on the fire department.
Yeah, we don't want to go that far with volunteering. So I'm hearing you, but I just don't know where we want to plug that in at. That,
I think,
The 90-day?
yeah.
At the very bottom, under abandonment.
under abandonment,
Take out 1 year?
No, we'll leave that in because,
Okay.
well, we have to figure out what the language is. But it starts by saying, the battery energy storage system, if the battery energy storage system ceases to operate for 90 consecutive days, the operator will be contacted.
well, I think I don't think you should put the onus on the town, I think you have to put it on the operator. That should the facility stop operating, that the town should be notified immediately, and that we should allow them 90 days or 180 days to either fix it or work on decommissioning it.
I agree. I agree.
Well, decommissioning is different than abandonment.
Yeah.
Abandonment is when they walk away.
But if
Yeah.
it ceases to operate consistently for more than 90 days,
Well, we can change the 1 year to 90 days,
Yeah.
really.
And we should be notified, the town should be notified by them if
Yeah.
it ceases to operate,
Yes,
period.
absolutely.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, but that would go somewhere else, not under abandonment. That should go under safety. that they should
yes.
notify us if it is not operating.
Yeah.
Right, because
I
if they
think that's a
abandon it,
good
they're not
idea.
going to tell us
Yeah.
anything, that's all. They'll be in Antigua or something.
Right, and that's what we need to find out from Eversource,
Yeah.
what their
And then
notifications.
abandonment, I still think should be less than a year, 6 months.
Agreed.
Didn't we, I think he
we're
was changing it to
90.
90 days.
Not abandonment to
Yeah.
90 days?
Yeah.
If it's
Totally.
acting inconsistently, if it's jumping for 90 days, I mean, that's a problem.
Okay.
And,
All right, so a battery energy source is considered abandoned when it ceases to operate consistently for more than 90 days?
Yes.
And then under safety, the town is to be notified within how many days? 7 days?
of,
If there's an issue,
oh, no,
immediately.
yeah,
Immediately?
immediately.
24 hours?
No,
I think that's
right
all-
now.
2 hours,
I think
recess.
I think that's already in there. If
If
there's
the-
something
yeah.
happens, they have to have somebody that's 2 hours away.
I think it's.
That's-
Yes,
yeah.
2
They
hours,
have a-
yeah.
They have a
okay.
2-hour response time,
All right, all right.
which when you're standing there watching it start to glow, 2 hours is.
I'll pass it on that way.
I'm in South Carver.
Bruce,
If it's not too much, we've been at this for 3 hours, do you
I
think?
know.
I was thinking the same thing, because as you notice, I'm less articulate than I was when I started.
I was going to continue till next Wednesday, but,
The battery
okay.
energy storage systems.
We all are.
Stay with it.
I just have one thing I wanted to say, we can think about it for next week. We have everything in here, vegetation, lighting, setbacks, there's nothing in here about noise. And these things hum.
They do,
They do.
and that's why I wanted this, the vegetative screen
Yeah.
and,
Baffling
Next
fences,
week.
something
Baffling,
like that. would be
right.
Yeah.
nice.
Next week's day.
And monitoring,
but we're gonna have to fence these things.
monitoring decibel quality.
Yeah.
So in your packet, you have a draft of January 11th minutes, and we do have somebody, Mary Ann, that's does the planning board minutes, and somehow somebody's roped her in, and I thank her for doing it, to do the solar and battery storage minutes. So
Motion to approve the minutes of January.
Second.
Whatever the date is.
Okay, so we have a motion by Sarah to approve the minutes of January 11th, 2023. And we have a second by Roger Shores.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So the one thing we want to add to the minutes are the documents from the meeting, and the documents for the meeting were the version of the solar bylaw we had at the time, and the list of concerns. So those are the 2 documents. So every set of minutes that we have will have the documents that were at the meeting. So for that meeting, it was, and they're on the sheet that I've got downstairs, but that version of the bylaw we were looking at that date, I want to say it was the 110 version plus that list. So those are the 2 things I'll add at the end of those listed documents to the minutes.
Okay, so we're approving the documents, the January 11th minutes with your addition
List
of the documents. Okay,
Just wanted
so-
to make sure that we
okay.
can do that.
So we already had a motion and a second. So those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
I'll be abstaining.
And we have one abstention, Mr. Shea.
Who
Mr.
seconded
Shea.
that?
Roger Shea, seconded.
So who was Sarah made the motion?
Chair moved, Roger seconded.
Roger second,
All right.
and then Connie abstained in the vote, and everybody
I got that.
voted aye. All right, so our next meeting will be February 15th, 5:30. And so motion for adjournment.
So moved. Mr. Shea moves.
Made the motion,
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Moore. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed? All right, good night, everyone, thank you.